Good morning. We're going to call this meeting to order. It is 9:01 a.m. Today is Wednesday, May 8th. We're at the Town Hall Chambers at 2731 Oak Street. This is our regularly scheduled Fort Myers Beach Management and Planning session. All town council members are present, town attorney, town manager. Town clerk, yes, thank you. If I was trying to mute my phone or my computer. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, Councilor Woodson is going to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No public comment.
No. All right, items for discussion. The first one is permitting. Frankie?
Good morning, Council. My name is Frankie Kropacek. I'm the Operations and Compliance Director for the Town of Fort Myers Beach. And I'd like to let you know that permitting is alive and well, and we're doing a great job. With the concept of the one-stop shop at the front door, as people come in through the Town Hall, the new Town Hall arrangement we have anyway, they're greeted by a permit tech. That has gone over like gangbusters. The people that we have up there, usually it's Ashley, the young lady that sits up there, or Brooke. They do take turns. They have really taken hold of what the whole idea of white glove service means. We've answered all questions up front. If we can't, we get the professionals back in our community development trailer, i.e. our planners, zoners, arrangers, the building official, those type of things. So we've gone from a system where you came into a triage trailer, you had to sit and wait. When you talked with somebody, yes, they serviced you and got you going out the door, to a system where you come in the building, and even if you have to wait momentarily, we have a system in place where you're getting everything that you need before you walk out that door. So we've made tremendous strides in getting information to the public that way. Yes, sir.
What is, I know that we're looking at a plan, or what are some of the things that you're doing to even improve it more?
So we've got a couple of checks and balances, so to speak, in the past. And as we know, there's a few things that have snuck through the cracks as far as getting permitted in this town. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in a perfect system. But what we do now is we've had on staff a permit manager, Andrew Gary, and we have a group of about 7 permit techs themselves. They interact on a almost instantaneously, every moment basis, with questions going back and forth. So Andrew acts as that second set of eyes. And then if it goes beyond that, then we get our one of our planners involved, whether it be Jason Smalley, Eli, Kendra, and that to kind of give it that final perusal. Andy and I try to stay engaged with them on a daily basis. So we're staying ahead of not only the developments, but also just the regular single-family homes that are going up currently. We're also adding a lot to code enforcement. So what we've done is you all know, with Tom Yazzo running that department now, or overseeing, I should say, that department, we've added Danny as our code coordinator. She came from Pinellas County. She's currently FACE certified up to level 4. And that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to set the tone right out of the gate that our code officers moving forward would all be state certified. That gives us a lot of provenance when you go in front of a magistrate or a judge, that we know the rules of engagement, we know how to properly preserve evidence, those type of things in cases. So they look at the officer just as much as they look at the material that's being presented. So we've taken the guesswork out. We've made sure that all of our officers are par none, number 1 type candidates coming in. So she's the overseer of the staff. We brought in a gentleman out of Cape Coral, Randy Schobel, who's also a compliant code officer. We just hired another lady who will be starting next week, who's a certified code officer. And with the help of our finance director and our town manager, we were able to secure another full-time code officer filling out the rest of this fiscal year. So we're going to have a lot of boots on the ground. We're going to be doing things the right. You've heard me from day one. It's all about education. So with more bodies out on the road doing the right thing, we're able to educate the public more as far as how we build things from the ground up and how we take care of our properties.
It seems to me that we were at one point talking about a software change. Is that still correct, or where are we on that?
Well, currently we're still using iWorks for a lot of it. We had Track It at one time, which is a system that like Cape Coral, larger communities have used. Track It has upgraded their systems to a point and we did not follow. This goes back about a year and a half ago. And so what we'd like to do is as we get a little bit more settled in, I'd like to revisit getting Track It. It just communicates a lot better with LIPA. And when a code officer's on a case, you're able to pull up things like almost instantaneously, and it would still work with iWorks as well.
Thanks.
Back in the day when Steve Proposky was here, was before obviously you guys were here. I was trying to talk to them, going through when we first after the storm, we're going through some of the things. The information within the permit porthole was very inadequate. You would see a rejection letter, and then all you would see is failed to comply with the boundaries of the permits or whatever it was. There was really nothing specific. And I had requested that we get more information. If something is rejected, it's a little bit easier to read as opposed to one line item. And I've been looking through some permits lately and noticing we're still doing some of that one line item thing. And I think would be very helpful to the homeowners, especially if they've hired contractors to do the work and they're remote living in, their other home up north, to be able to follow along. Because I know all of us were probably getting a lot of calls and spent a lot of time checking on permits to try to help people get answers. And I think if we could be more clear in the description of if it fails or what exactly we're looking for, I know it takes a little bit more time. There was talk about maybe getting someone that specifically that's all they do is, but this was again back right after the storm. But I think that's something that could be very beneficial through iWorks system to be able to enter as much information as possible to save calls to staff, emails to us and to you.
Right.
If they know clearly what it is that they're being rejected for, and then they could call and obviously ask, what do I need to do? I don't expect you to write a whole, biography of what the issue is and how to fix it, but at least give more information than just it failed because one line,
Yes, sir. We'll make sure that happens.
I think just to go off some things Frankie said, one thing you will see that we've done is we've made a lot of changes in the code compliance and even in the permitting with staffing. That was important to me to be able to just elevate the level of performance, if you will, in those two areas of our organization. And we have done that, especially in what we've done with the code compliance, because they do work together because that's the extra set of eyes out there. We even go to 7 days a week with code compliance. We've got those individuals as we fill those spots in. Actually, we have only one left over from the code department when I got here. It's completely changed over. So we do see, and then of course we're requiring certifications and, just as much as ordering badges and doing the things that just changes the way that they feel and look at themselves about what they're doing. And again, Frankie talks about it a lot, is compliance. We're just looking for compliance. We're not looking for fines or I gotchas, just compliance.
I think another thing that could be beneficial, right after the storm, the vice mayor was doing some great videos and sitting down and talking to people. I think using our new PIO to her fullest extent to help, permitting sees the trends, when you're building something, you go through concrete, then framing, then you work your way through. And as you start seeing an influx of those permits, maybe having some sort of, I don't want to say best practices, but there's a lot of things that require a permit and some things that don't require a permit. And I think being able to get that messaging out so that people understand, do I need a permit to replace one shingle? Do I need a permit to, replace the latch on my gate? Do I, there's going to be a lot of that, I think, coming forward, and it has been coming. But if you could just once a week or something, get something out, 30-second video of just a good practice of, what needs a permit, what doesn't need a permit, and why, I think the public would benefit from that.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'm always driven by data. Have you guys been able to capture, and I know it's hard, but I think people always want to know, how long is this going to take? And before, it used to take forever. And now we're at the point where, hey, if I'm doing a new build, I know if no variances, it's going to take me X amount of weeks to get the permit through, assuming it's done correctly.
Properly
Do
submitted.
we properly submitted. I know there's a lot of variables here, but it seemed like a year ago, it took what people said forever. But what was that forever? And what is it now? And what is our goal?
So the forever part was a lot of different things put into the mix. One of the biggest things was having different eyes on a different coast that did not live our life every day. So a lot of the permit reviews, a lot of the building plan reviews, the whole planning part of it was shipped over to the East Coast prior to Andy and I getting here. We were able to not only, along with the Jacobs group, bring in a building official that's able to do reviews in-house, but also to Andy's question a little while ago, bringing in a planner for the town, somebody that can actually do that and help with that
Right.
in-house.
So
We've been able to school it down so that a roundabout answer to your question, we're kicking them out in 2 weeks, Scott.
okay,
That's-
that's great. If
that's
we
a
can
new
capture
bill.
that data, because a
Yeah.
lot of the realtors are trying to sell homes,
Right. No,
and the home
and I
buyer's
get it.
like, how long is it going to take me to get? If I don't need a variance, what can I expect, and what's your goal? And then if they need a variance, how long will that process take?
And depending on the variance. Okay.
Right,
So,
of course.
right. And again, we through council, we've tried to package that up. We tried to change that a little bit to expedite that part of the question as well. So all these factors combined will really help get the process moving in a lot faster generation. We already see a lot of building starts. I can show the report that we put together for the town manager each month as a directorship. You know, our new building starts for just single family homes is up the last 2 months compared to where it was the last 6 months. So we're starting to see a lot of shovels in the ground, a lot more houses getting raised up, built
Oh, we can
new,
see it.
whatever the case
Yeah.
may be.
So
And so we're turning those things, the new ones that have come in the last few months, we're kicking those out the door, complete, explained to that homeowner or to that contractor in record time.
And Scott, I think I can help you out a little bit because it was before they were here. It's when Chris and Keith were here.
Mhm.
And just, they were obviously like you guys were when you first started, they were bombarded with just,
oh, I'm sure. yeah.
drinking.
Been trying to get
So I
systems.
Yeah, so I was trying to help on the back end of the permitting side and looking through some things. Our processes that we had back then were antiquated, to say the best. And I'll give you a perfect example. The first thing we saw were demo permits. People wanted to come through with demo permits. But when you go to the town website, you would click on demo permit and there would be something that you would sign. And you would think that you were done and you'd submit it. And then it would come in, it would take 4 or 5 days, whatever, and it would go back and say, well, you need this. Then they would fill that out, which is in a different part of the website.
Yeah,
and then they'd
you
send
need
it in.
this.
And then 4 or 5 days, and then like, nope, you need this. So there were 3 documents. And I'm like, why wouldn't, if I click on demo permit,
Should all-
everything I need should be right there.
Right.
And then what added to that on a bigger scale was, to your point, it was going across. And if it was a flood review, they would send it to flood, they would review it, deny it, then they'd fix everything, and then it would go to environmental or whatever. Then they would review it and deny it. So it was always back and forth. And when Jacobs came in, it was very important that they understood that this should be a one review. And that's how they do it in Benin. And I think that's how they're doing it here now. It goes through the entire review process. If it fails environmental, if it fails flood, whatever it fails, you get it all back in one rejection letter so that you can fix
Yeah,
it.
and fix the
And so-
5 things instead
and
of one at a
that
time.
dramatically changed how fast people were getting. I don't know if you guys are getting, but you get emails like, I submitted my new house permit and I got it back in 12 days.
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
I've been
so
getting those too.
People are starting, so I think
Yeah.
to your point, I think where we are, what came through, the average time it took to get that submittal, if we can get that through the iWorks.
Yeah, I mean, that data
we can
is,
capture that and we can get that to you. That's part of our monthly report to the town manager. And I know he shares that as well. So, yes, we can specifically get you that as far as start to finish. We call that a perfect packet. So
Right.
in the grand scheme of things, if you get out of a handful of permits for new starts, if you get one out of a handful as a perfect permit, that's awesome. The other ones aren't challenging at all. Even with a variance, you can still walk the people through. There's things that you can get moving right away that in the past, they weren't even able to open that door until you came and got that variance.
right.
We're trying not to penalize somebody for having an obscure lot, a size or something like that. Our job here is to not only get the house up, but get it up safe and get it up so we have a safe community moving forward. And that's kind of what we've tried to do from day one.
Vice Mayor?
So volume wise, I'm sorry, I just want, where are we volume wise? For, like, say for the
New builds, how many,
new builds, remodels,
I think we're in the area of around, I want to say last month it was close to 150 new starts.
wow.
just in that month,
Yeah.
or what's our total now?
I don't have that handy, but I can definitely get that to you.
Yeah, I think that'd be good information
Yeah.
for the,
Yeah.
to let the town know, hey, there's 150 new homes being built or 350 new homes. And that will help in our planning too, because, you know, as
Correct.
more people come back,
I can tell you this much without giving you a number, that from December till now, not even going back just to the first year, from December till now, we're kicking it in this town. Well, you know, I mentioned to all of you a long time ago that when we get those complaints about pilings going in on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, you know, we kind of know that we're made it. Well, we're not there yet, but you can go up and down every single street, and every single street in this town is touched by new construction of some sort and fashion.
What you just said sparked something in my head. I don't know if you guys have got, there was a resident that complained about work being done on a Saturday and a Sunday.
Yeah. It's like,
And,
seriously.
and that's in our code. Is that something that we need to look at to, because if we're under the state of emergency, do, is that, because technically they're right, you know,
Correct.
but in order to allow people that can or want to work on a Saturday, is that something we should take a look at?
Or a Sunday.
Or Sunday? Well, yeah. I mean,
So,
maybe not, I don't know.
so
Some
do-
people deserve days.
so your point, Counselor Safford, in April, there were 296 new permits, 13 of those for new single-family homes, and over 1,950 inspections.
Whoa, that's great.
yeah, if
People
we
don't
keep-
have
if we can
any
keep
idea.
driving that data, I think it'll give people a lot of hope, and then it'll help us too, as we're planning. We're going to know there's going to be, you know, 400 more people living here in X amount of time. And do you have, once shovels go in the ground, I know it has a lot to do with the builders and whatnot, and, you know, money and everything else, but once that permit's done, what's the average home build right now? Do we know what that is? When you do final CO from the day you set
No,
the permit?
because again, we
Too
have
many
a
variables.
variance of properties being built back. So
Okay.
we have everything from the very modest single family home. Some of these ones that are coming in here, I don't want to say prefab, but the modular type that are being elevated up.
Quicker.
They're very fine, very solid construction, to the more custom type home. So it kind of does depend on the build somewhat, but it can be easily tracked and easily correlated and put on a spreadsheet for you.
Great.
So when does this planner start? I know you,
We are finalizing negotiations now, so we sent the letter to her yesterday, waiting for a response.
oh, I know what I wanted to ask. I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
I keep thinking of these things. So I'm hearing, and I think everybody hears nightmare stories about builders and construction people and people that are not getting it done fast enough, or they just don't show up for 3 weeks or something like that. Is there any way to quantify, or and I know we had a builder list out there that I think is so out of date right now. Is there
The-
any way we can give warnings to people, or?
Well, what we do is if somebody does have a problem with a contractor or a builder, we definitely want them to reach out to the town. We will notify the Florida
EPR.
Department, right? But we cannot be in the business of recommending builders. We used to have a list of, I believe, licensed contractors in the area
Mhm,
that people could look at. And again, you have to be a licensed contractor to work
Right.
on a home.
right.
And so that's one thing that we did, but we're not in the business of recommending contractors. We just can't.
No, and I,
But as far as updating our list of licensed contractors,
Mhm.
you give us the information, we'll make sure that gets put in an updated list.
yeah, I mean, I'm more of on the side of not recommending and letting people know that where there's been issues.
Right, and I think we have a couple of places, we have a couple of places on our webpage in the community development that do let homeowners know to beware. Not to go by somebody stopping in the Walmart parking lot saying, hey, I got a bunch of windows I can put in for you for $500.
Right.
Again,
We're talking about it has to be a licensed contractor. Beware of that. Nancy, if I may, what's our liability of saying, hey, ABC contract, don't use them? Buyer beware. I mean, is that something that
We would just basically be encouraging them to use licensed contractors, because unlicensed is right. What I did want to add was Paul Waters, who's one of our attorneys with the firm. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, he used to be the deputy secretary at Florida Department of Business Regulation. So he's very knowledgeable of contractor licensing. He recently spoke at a seminar and there's little things that people could be aware of. And one thing that really stuck in my mind was if you are licensed under state law, you have to have your license on your truck, on your vehicle. And it's an easy way to spot an unlicensed contractor. They may say, hey, I'm licensed and insured. And you look at their vehicle, if it's not there, it should raise a red flag. So there's a few things like that, and I can work with Paul and send that information. And that would be kind of information, just giving it out to the public.
Right.
And that's very good. And to answer or to a question that was asked earlier about how we can update our information on the town webpage, our PIO and with the help of Andy have been going through and we are updating a lot of that stuff. So on community development, there was like a whole litany of frequently asked questions, most of which are outdated or didn't lead you anywhere except down another rabbit hole.
Right.
So we're going through those item by item and looking at ones that are not only more relevant, but more pertinent, and to group things together, like you said, with the demolition permit, Mr. Mayor, making sure that it's all concise, compact, one-stop shop. If we can do it coming in the front door, we can do it on our webpage and our portal as well.
Very good. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, this has been an excellent discussion. When I originally asked for this to be put on the M&P calendar, my hope was is that we would have somebody from the permitting team here. Is Andrew available or
I can definitely get Andrew Geary up here.
could we? Do you mind? Because I just not that you guys have been doing great, but you guys are he's on the front lines, right?
Yes.
Are you comfortable having him?
No, more
I
than
hate to use the word testify, but
Yeah, no. I think you get a good discussion from him as well.
great. I just have a few questions for him. But in the interim, just a couple additional sort of broader questions. Anecdotally, and I think it's real. The number of complaints about permitting has dropped dramatically to the town's credit. Is there a way for us? And I've talked to the Jacobs Group folks about this, and I know our system is not tailored as best as it can be in terms of how to do this. But can we actually have a dashboard where we have some metrics that, because there's still rumors that there's backlogs, you hear all this stuff. Is there any way we could have a dashboard on our website that says, hey, we're turning these around in 2 weeks or less, the ones that are submitted correctly, et cetera? And is there a way where we can sort of make that public so it's data driven and not not so much story driven or anecdotal?
Yes, sir. By all means, we can definitely get that out, whether it would be on the community development portal or part of it, or just on our town webpage weekly. This is what we've got working. This is what came into the office this week. This is what we've turned out. And these are the categories that correlate to that.
I just want to have a data-driven answer. 'Cause, I mean, the mayor he says this every week. He says, listen, and he gets a lot of them. We all get some of them, but he gets a lot of them. The complaints about permitting, and he's declared, and I certainly see it as well, that the complaints are almost non-existent at this point. Not that there's not problems, but it's been dramatic. But that's anecdotal, and you still hear folks out and about in the Coconut Telegraphs. It's recanting these rumors that there's still months backlogs, and it appears not to be the case. But if we can show that on our dashboard, because when you're measuring success, I mean, I think that's important to have it be data driven. So I think that would be great. And this concept of, and you guys kind of came in midstream, but I think the turnaround really occurred under your administration. The putting the premier team assembling the premier team, the bringing in the Jacobs Group and bringing a lot of this in-house, addressing issues up front when people submit. Is there, and I know there's not one silver bullet, but is there one change that you all have made that has produced this radical paradigm shift, or has it been the combination? And I guess that's an easy one. You'll say it's a combination thing, and I get that, but is there one more than others that has made the turnaround happen?
Absolutely. I think we've empowered some of our staff to make decisions and to do things where they didn't have to keep asking questions. Say, hey, what's going on? Andrew's a perfect example of that.
Oh, Andrew's here. Okay.
And, just we elevated him and we're like, make decisions. We have your support because he's knowledgeable. He's the front line. He's not actually the front line, but he's as close as you get. We've empowered the planners in the department to make decisions. Before when we got here, they were always coming to us asking the questions like, why are you asking? And to us, the answer was obvious. they knew the answer because we'd say, "What's your answer?"
Mhm.
And then they would give me like, "Okay, tag, you're it. Go do it." So we just empowered them. I mean, you can bring in 1,000 people, but if they're still asking the same questions, FAQs, the list gets long.
Mhm.
It's where they were. Look, we all know what was happening. 2 days after the storm, 3 days after the storm, 3 weeks after the storm. Get it out there. Everybody's asking questions. Just dump knowledge to people, and great. And then the questions got this long, and then add another question, add another question. So it's like pare that down, empower the staff, empower the whole staff. I mean, it's just Joe came, not to get off subject, but the budget and the finances and things. Go tag, you're it. We needed to do that, and empowering staff, all the staff. And we alluded to it on Monday in the review that my style is to empower them. I don't want to make all the decisions. I don't have that
Can't-
much
can't-
time.
Can't do it.
You guys were getting the emails. It's like, you don't have that much time. You've got lives as well. So
Andrew, if
The-
you come forward and
yeah.
introduce yourself, first of all, thank you for all that you've done and continue to do.
Jim, before you jump back to what you were saying about that dashboard, I think I love that idea. Is there a possibility to break it out between residential and commercial?
Yes,
And the
sir.
reason I say that is because many people don't understand or don't know that when it's commercial, it also involves the fire review.
That's a good point.
So I think it's important to, in that dashboard, show it's approved by the town. It's now in waiting or whatever for fire review, because sometimes when we get emails and you find out it's a condo, which falls under the commercial permit, and most of the time it's just waiting for a review. It's not the town, it's the fire district. Sometimes it's the town holding it up, but sometimes it's the fire district. So I think it's important to make that distinction, just so that we know who to give the information to contact. This is who you need to reach out to give the answers to your question.
Yes, sir.
Andrew, would you mind stating your name and title and how long you've been with the town and where you came from?
I'm Andrew Gary, Permitting Services Manager. I'm with the town coming up on 5 years in February, and I'm originally from New Jersey.
And you've been with the town for 5 years?
Yeah, well, 4 3/4.
And you've been in permitting all this time?
Yes.
So I'll ask you the question I just asked Andy
Sure.
and Frankie. What do you see is the main reason for the amazing turnaround in the permitting process, and from your perspective?
To me, one of the biggest is having in-house plan review. That really turned it around for us, I feel. It went from weeks to a matter of days to get it completed. So and also they're on site, so they can come and talk to them. It's not a person that's up North Florida or whatever. So I think that's a big,
It's great. Let me
Big
ask you
plus.
this, Andrew. You and your team, and I know the questions today are probably different than they were 18, 19 months ago. What's the most common questions you're getting from folks coming into these trailers?
like, the biggest thing is owner builder. So they're not familiar with the permitting process. So they come in, they have a lot of questions. It's not so much the contractors, although there is questions from them as well. But it's the owner builders that, like I said, are inexperienced at it, and they need to be taught on how to process a permit and how to go through applying for it.
Is there one specific question that they have that's common, or it's just a litany of questions?
It's a litany of questions, especially from the owner builders, like I said, because they don't know from the beginning how to even start.
What
So,
advice would you give someone who wants to do an owner builder permit?
come on in. We have somebody always here, always ready to help. Normally they process things online. All our permits go through our permitting portal, but they come in, we'll scan the documents for them. We'll do all of that. We'll process it for them. So we have enough staff now to do that.
If someone did have some questions for your permitting division, what's your advice to them? Should they physically come here? Should they send an email? Should they call? What's the best way for them to interact with your team?
Email is pretty quick. We're fast on the turnarounds on email. It's really whatever is more convenient to them. So we
Very
have
good.
people.
There was a time where you shouldn't call because that wasn't efficient, but it sounds like you in your preference in a perfect world, email or come in person or
In a perfect world, emails.
Okay.
Because they're easy to process, but if they have a lot of questions, it's probably better that they come in personally.
And if I could just
Yep.
jump in real quick,
Yep,
because
please.
it goes right along with what you're asking about builder permits.
Hmm.
I've had some people reach out, some who are trying to go through it now, some who have been caught doing the work and now trying to go back to get the permit.
Right.
Maybe it's a Nancy answer. Just a quick brief overview of who qualifies for an owner permit. There's some talk about, well, it's a rental property and it's an LLC, does that qualify that I own the property, but I have it in an LLC, it's a duplex, triplex, whatever, and I want to rebuild it myself under my owner builder permit, are they allowed to do that or not allowed? I just think it's important for people to understand who can get an owner builder permit, who can't.
Yeah, I don't recall, I don't know right offhand, but I think, didn't we go through whether a trust?
We
trust
talked
is-
about a trust.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
long as it's a revocable trust, they can do it.
Right.
The LLC can't.
Cannot.
They need to
There you
hire a contractor.
That's what I wanted to get at. Is
Yeah.
they can't be an older builder. If it's in an LLC, they can't
Yes.
get an older builder.
As-
In a trust, it can. And that.
A revocable.
Revocable
Right.
trust,
Yeah.
Right.
Depends on the trust.
So if I could go back to what Andrew said about the email, we are finding now that we're going through this FEMA process that we're going through, that a narrative is what they're looking for. So we prefer the emails, and then we respond, and it creates that narrative with the property that becomes part of the FEMA documents. And so with that
It
is
creates a record.
correct.
That's
And
correct.
because if we just making phone calls, obviously we can't, it's not a public record, and we have to reinvent everything, and we don't want to rely on our memories. We want to make sure we have the documentation, and an email is always the best way. When they ask our questions, we respond, and then it becomes part of the FEMA documents as we go through this process. Not now, but it'll come back later.
And since we're on that, this basic question, Andrew, if someone had a permitting question and they wanted to email you, what's the best way to email you? Is that email address on the website?
Yes, my email is, as well as the building permits email.
Do you prefer going to the general building permits email, or do you prefer going to your email? How do you?
Well, I mean, if it's something, they have a specific question, they want to speak to a manager or anything like that, I prefer they send it to me. But if it's a general question, they could send it to building permits.
That's helpful. What's the most common mistake you see in your shop?
Incomplete applications.
Give
or-
an example of a
let's-
common mistake in terms of what they leave out.
Sure, just something like the owner acknowledgement. They won't put a job address, or they'll forget to sign it. We just started incorporating notarization again. So stuff like that. It's just little things
What
that
was that last thing you just said? Explain that in lay terms.
getting our documents notarized.
You mean we didn't require it, now we're requiring it again?
Well, we used to, and then after the storm, we waived it.
Yep.
Just to process things quicker. But now we're putting it back in because we found a few times that people are forging signatures. So to stop that,
That's good
Put it back in.
information, because I don't think people realize that. So
Yeah.
now the documents have to be notarized when they previously didn't.
yes.
Do we have a notary here? in case
Yeah, I'm a
there's
notary.
problems?
Almost everybody.
I know Jason's a notary.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well, the public should know that because they,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
And they used to have to go to Fort Myers.
yeah,
Yeah.
I tell everybody you can come here and get it done free. Another thing about the owner builder commercial properties, they can do owner builder, but up to $75,000 in repair.
That's good information.
Mhm. So these condo unit owners, we actually, if we take them in, I actually have the building official, Joe, he'll review it, make sure everything's okay. And then,
So Andy, this is what I was referring to, and Frankie, this kind of information, as you're seeing things come in,
Mhm.
having those weekly video clips of this is what we're starting to see, here's the data that,
Yeah.
we want to make sure you get out there, because then all of us can push it out to everybody that we know, and it spreads pretty quickly, as we all know how the social media monster works.
And to your point, Mr. Mayor, this all came through our meeting that we had with the HOA presidents. And Joe was at that meeting, Joe Speck was at that meeting. And we took all that information in, and slowly by slowly, as they started coming back online, as you all know, we're still a long way away from having our condos up and running. But as they do start coming online, more and more, we're getting, for lack of a better term, bevy of unique situations. One of which you have to always be flexible. You have to kind of think outside the box. Having a building official that's right there, that we can make those decisions, having key staff like Andrew and his wealth of knowledge, we're able to do that on the fly. We're able to get those people their answers immediately, so they're not waiting weeks to put drywall back up into their unit or to put carpeting back in their unit, those type of things. We're able to do that right away. And to your point, we will make a habit of putting that out there.
So to kind of tie into the strategic plan, once we set our goals, you will set that high level goals, and then we'll start breaking it down. but all this reporting, documenting, it's all somebody's responsibility to make sure that we're working toward those goals. But we will, performance measures and tracking and all that is so important. We do it now, but we don't capture it in a performance evaluation. So we're continually improving in the area and things like that where somebody's assigned that task. We're working more toward that, and I'm, we started it, a week, 2 weeks ago, and now we will continue to build on that as we continue. And we've got a line item here, FMB priorities. That's kind of ties into all that as well. So.
And Andrew, last question.
Sure.
And please know you're here we're trying to get information out.
Not a
and it's such
problem.
great opportunity.
I'm happy to be here.
We're not here we're very thankful for your service, and you've done an amazing job, you and your team.
Thanks.
So
We're gonna grill you.
So since you have the microphone, and there's actually quite a few people who watch these, and I think it's also simulcast on Beach Talk Radio. So we've got a lot of people who watch this. You're on the front lines, your team's on the front lines, you see what's coming in every day. Is there any basic advice you'd like to give folks, or anything you want to kind of help people understand about your process so they can better utilize your process?
I think the first thing is, if you're going to apply for a permit, is to read the documentation, read the application through. There's so much information on the permit applications. We'll get calls with questions, and those answers are on the application themselves. So I think a big part of it is educating yourself and reading through those documents. The second part is just go online and process it. And again, if you have questions, you can call, email, come in. We're always here, happy to help. And that's about it. We're pushing them out really quick right now. So the turnaround time is probably one of the quickest in Southwest Florida. So I don't think there's a problem, with any of the permitting. It's just getting it right and the first time.
That's awesome. Thank you for your service.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
To your question, Vice Mayor, this doesn't happen without people like Andrew, just plain and simple. So we can sit up here and we can pontificate all we want. You have to have somebody carrying it out and have the knowledge to carry out. Everybody in that community development trailer works as a team. From the moment they punch in till the moment they leave, even when they leave going out to the parking lot, I've heard many times of them still talking about dealing with a customer or how they could do it. It's through osmosis. They share all the information together, and they work on stuff together. One instance a little while back, and I don't mean to take up your time, we needed to have a title search. The person that normally did that job, one person, wasn't here. They took it upon themselves to find out how to do it, and every single person in that department knows how to do it without us interacting or anything.
That's great.
That's the quality of employees that the town of Fort Myers Beach has.
You're never taking up our time when we're
No.
talking permitting. So this is all good.
No.
Thank you, though.
And I will tell you, and I know Vice Mayor Adderall, and it probably Councilor Safford, who's been on the LPA too, that this is the first time in as long as I've been involved that we haven't been spending the majority of our day answering permitting emails. So it's nice
Yeah.
to be able to see,
Yeah, constant.
we've seen both sides of the spectrum, if you will. And it just shows that if you work together, that you can really make things much smoother for everyone. So it is definitely a breath of fresh air. So congratulations to your team, like Andrew and all those guys. And thank you for Jacobs, and looking forward to the new planner. Any
Mayor,
other-
can I say something?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to say too, that I have really appreciated working with your staff. There has been a huge change, a big difference, working with them from when we first got here to where we are today. And it's always a pleasure to work with them and to be here. So I just wanted to commend them as well from our perspective, because we have a little different perspective than others may.
Mhm.
So we're feeling the difference too.
Good to
Very
hear.
good.
Thanks, Nancy.
Good. Anything else on this item? John, you good?
I'm good.
All right. Next, we have impact fees. I asked to have this put on here because I think we're at a key stage in our evolution where this is something we really have to take a look at. So I know that there's a study in here. I don't know if Andy or Frankie, you want to, or not a study, but the proposal and the reason for impact fees, how they can be beneficial. Your pizza's ready. With all the new development that we've got going on. And if you can also touch on the fees. I know that we got a fee schedule coming up we're going to be talking about, and I think we can really address some of these issues, but just kind of explain a little bit about the impact fees, how they work, and how we can implement them through what's been proposed by Access.
Yeah, so what we did is we asked the Access Group to put together, Jason Green and Sarah Probst to put together a packet, so to speak, of how we could, one, implement better in the community, not only on the commercial side, residential side, but also on the commercial side, especially with new developments coming in the area. As we all know, there's a lot of communities, when you come in as a developer, that's a given. Fort Myers Beach was not that way. Fort Myers Beach hooked up many big resorts, many big condo units just for the sake of hooking them up without really capturing what they needed to help prolong life of their utility system, their infrastructure, things like that. Impact fees have to be looked at two different ways. They have to be looked at as a benefit to the town to keep the town in business, so to speak, to provide those services, but also to keep everything reliant and safe. If we're asking a contractor to hook up a huge resort into our system, we don't know what they're doing. Impact fees are like that permit type thing, if I can kind of cross or correlate the two. It allows us to make sure that it's done properly. And by putting those fees in place, I'd give a good example. We had a development here on the beach. It was a local establishment. They had 2 rental units above. The new proposal, as it went through, was the commercial establishment below and a single family home above. The square footage was the same. So when you go to look at the impact fee for that building, staff immediately said, oh, it's a commercial development, we got to do this. It's like, no, we're only looking at, they had the commercial development below, that's a given. The space above didn't change. All that was a common wall was taken out. The same square footage relies on it. So what we do is, if you had that place before, you get credited for those impact fees moving forward. So after the discussion with staff and Sarah and whatnot, we all came to the understanding of that's how we need to move forward. Impact fees to a new resort are totally different. We go by square footage, we go by size, we go by density and what they're impacting onto the town. So with this study and what we asked Access to do was to give us a basis, look at other communities and how they approach it, how we needed to update our system, which for all intents and purposes either was non-existent or very lackadaisical at best, and make it more uniform across the board. So as we started looking on the commercial side or the residential side, we know what we're doing there as far as impact fees go. The commercial side was always a little bit more ambiguous. So as we looked at this thing, we tried to develop a system that gave us the room to grow as we grow. You start out a baseline, we're going to start in here, and in year 2 or 3, as development really starts picking up, you have the steps and the wherewithal within the system to start moving your system up. So that was the precipice or whatever is the top of this thing that we were looking at. As far as the plan itself, I think if you look on your packets, they did break it down
Yes.
quite a bit as far as we go. I honestly think it's something that's very well needed for the town to take us that next step.
And then just so people that don't understand, how do those impact fees be, how are they spent? What are some of the common things that they go into once you collect them from a commercial
So
property?
a good example, like if we're a commercial property, if we're putting impact fees on for water, it stays in water. It grows our utility department. It grows not only the infrastructure that we have within the utilities, like our water, our potable water that we have on the island, but it gives us the wherewithal to enlarge our employee base and get better equipment, get better services on the island as far as tanks, those type of things. So it gives you the operating wherewithal to do those things. Impact fees usually stay within a set segment, so they're
And
not
you can-
coming
and-
in.
And I guess what I was just trying to get at is there are specific buckets you could put it in.
That is
Parking,
correct. That is correctly. Yes, sir.
Stormwater.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, just kind of a short answer of what they can be used for.
One thing, and Nancy can probably speak better to this, but if you look in here, one of the points that it made that if our impact fee study is more than 5 years old, it can be challenged in court, which means they can say, well, it's antiquated, I'm not paying anything, and now you're tied up in court paying litigation fees and things of that nature. So it's
The study is a critical component of establishing a good impact fee program.
Right. And again, like we had talked about, and you all know, it was hit or miss at best over the last few years, even before Ian. And we need to have a bit more reliable way of treating everyone that comes on this island, whether it's just a little mom and pop retail spot or it's a huge resort. Everybody has to pay their fair share.
And it's safe to say commercial development expects it. They totally
Mhm.
understand
That's
impact fees.
part
They
of the game
expect it.
moving in, yes.
And the county's been collecting them forever. So we're not doing anything that's outside the
No,
realm
sir.
of what people.
No, sir.
So my next question is we've got a lot of developments coming. Nancy, how does it work as we go through this? We approve something that they come back with. How can you retroactive that to a certain, or does it just start from the date of?
No, it starts from the day of, but again, having that study completed, and I don't know offhand what the timeline is.
It says 4 to, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And
when
we
does
have
the clock start after we approve it or
Yes,
once
you
they put
have to have
shovels
an
in the ground?
ordinance in place.
So if a development comes in, and we approve it and we don't have an impact fee today in place, then
And you can't assess it.
wow. Just wow.
I'd say we
Can
need to get going on this
I
like
was-
ASAP.
Yeah.
Hey, that's why I wanted it.
Mhm.
I think at this point, yep,
I
sorry.
just have a question regarding the study that we're having done. Will the study also include impact fees that are currently in place by other municipalities? In other words, other governing districts? Because I understand the fire department has an impact fee. I hear rumors that the county has various impact fees
They-
already that people on Fort Myers Beach pay. Can we have that data included in the study?
Yes,
so we can
I know Jason Green, who is really spearheading this. It is in that report somewhat. He does break it down a little bit and he talks about other municipalities, but he's also captured everybody in this area. When I say everybody, I think he took that ring out almost 75 square miles from Fort Myers Beach and reached out to those and did a case study of what they charge coming in, coming out, and what they coalesce to us.
And what I'm trying to understand is, yeah, when either a commercial or residential developer builds a project on Fort Myers Beach, what are they currently paying now? In other words, what's the fire department? What's the county getting? What are the various? I think the county has a litany of different ones potentially.
They do.
I'd like to see a breakdown of what those are, and then what we would be adding to that if we decide to put an impact fee in place.
We can get that
Just so we
information.
can
to you,
have an aggregate picture
Yes,
of
sir.
everything. Yeah,
I think, the next step is to put this on the next agenda
that's fine.
with that information as well. So you see
Mhm.
what's
You
happening.
certainly have
and-
my consent to do that. As long as we have-
Um,
Yeah.
I just have a question. When you look at the fees and expenses that are proposed, I mean, is this something, are any parts of this negotiable? Do you see this as pretty normal fee structure, or is it high? Is it below? I mean, where are we with that?
From my experience, it looks pretty industry standard. You could always go out for bid and start asking those questions, and then there's cost involved the intangible costs that
Right.
waiting 30 to 45 to 60 more days to
Right.
select, and we're already could be 2 months into this process, and it could be a cost savings that you really don't realize because we don't usually track. Joe and I talk about intangible cost all the time. We don't track the cost of doing business sometimes.
And that was my next question is, one, we don't have to send this out for bid because we already have access as a professional service?
Yes, yeah, they've already been competitively bid and they're on our list, so we can,
We can
yes,
use
do a test.
Okay, the next question is, I assume this would come out of the building fund, the
Yes, sir.
payment for this
Yes.
would come from permitting fees, things like that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think you try to get on the next,
Mhm.
got it? All right, next is FMB priorities. Is this you, Andy?
As per council's request. Actually, yeah, I'll lead it off. One thing I've done is I've looked at one other beach community, and I think what we really want to do is schedule and a follow up to our strategic planning. For instance, there's one beach community where not where I used to be, but before, and what they identified, for instance, was quality of life, public safety, local economic development, sustainability. Those type things as the high level things, which then everything else will be derived from. And I think that's where we've got to be probably sometime this is what, May 8th, probably by the end of the month or the 1st of June to get do this strategize again to start establishing those goals, maybe in our individual conversations that we have the next couple of weeks. We'll start bringing those together. I'll get more together for you, and I think it's going to be more of a one-on-one. Here's what I'm seeing around with towns, beach communities. I don't think we compare ourselves to, Arcadia. I think obviously we will compare ourselves to beach communities. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've managed 3 of them. So they're all a very similar dynamic. There's not a lot of difference between those. So not reinventing the wheel, drawing off what other people have already done, we will work from that. And so I think starting next week as we have our individual meetings and we talk, I want to just have this as one of the subjects we talk about. I know there's, with July fast approach, I'd like to have some of this zeroed in probably by the second meeting in June. So then we can have that out there. All right, here's the next stop, and working with Angela. Yeah. Talking to her a little bit, and my staff. That helps me start now formulating as we go through the budget process and we look at our next fiscal year. Obviously, this is going to take a couple of months. We won't have it prepared probably as we prepare the budget now, but we'll be able to implement some of it going into the fiscal year with our new reviews and our accountability, our performance measures, that type of thing. So I just wanted to just bring you up to speed that I continue to drive this and continue to, and again, let me just point out something. They did zero in on a mission statement and core values, vision statement, that type of thing. We'll start doing some of that as well. And basically on all of theirs, they only had a couple of goals, which is really good because then you can get too spread out, if you will, and then things just dangle out there. We want to be very focused on what we want to attack in a positive way: infrastructure, quality of life. I mean, it's just a broad subject, and then we can fill in the blanks behind that. So I'll just be bringing this more. It's really, and staff and I've already talked about, especially Joe and I, we've talked a lot about that, and I've explained the system that I'm familiar with is like it's like a golden threads system. We want to be the benchmark. We want to be the town that everybody from legal to sanitation, beach pickup, cleanup, everything, the whole kit. We want people to look at how we do it because, that what I'm trying to accomplish is a lot of towns don't do. You saw the last one. It was more task oriented. We need to be more goal oriented. And that way we can get there faster and more people are held accountable. It's the whole team. There'll be 80 plus people working to accomplish the 4 or 5 goals that you will set. That's a big deal. And the way that I've seen it done is it could be, the quality of life one. Let's just use that. I know that's a broad brush we paint with a lot, but everybody's sitting right there, all those directors, and they will all have something to do with that, and their staff will. There'll be some like infrastructure. Well, actually, your finance director has something to do with infrastructure. So everybody will have something to do with these golden threads, and the golden thread kind of weaves through and it just strengthens, golden thread. Yeah, it's pretty strong, by the way. It's just, I'm not using that just because.
Never held one.
But it is. It's very strong, and we want to make sure that we just weave everything together and everybody's accountable, and it really changes the way staff looks at it. And Frankie mentioned it, and I've heard it too. Staff talking about things after they're clocked out, they're going outside and stuff. They still talk about what they did or what they're doing. It's a mindset, and we're trying to establish that. And Karen and I have talked about it since the first minute we looked at each other in the interviews about strategic planning and goal setting and mission and vision statements and things like that. I just think we are going to set that bar pretty high. I'm really excited. I'm getting old. So this is like that one that I really want to go out on a really high note and, it's really set that bar where it's like, wow, let's get these staff members every time they talk about public works or they talk about finance, they're going to come our staff members and say, can you come talk to us? Or, that's real. I think too much of it gets left behind. And unfortunately, it's happening on post-disaster, something that got our attention, right? Something that brings everything to the surface. And now you've seen that strategic plan. The manager shouldn't be the name beside every goal, every action, every task. It shouldn't be me. I mean, that's some, but a tier 1 would be this level. but actually it could be a tier 2 or tier 3 could actually still be this level. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the lowest, the lowest employee. I use that term very loosely. I don't mean that in a bad way, but the entry level employee could be have a big part to play in a specific task one. We just have to formulate that and get the right goals in place. And that, to me, is pretty exciting. I never thought I'd get that excited about this kind of thing, but it's like we've got an opportunity. You guys have given me an opportunity, and I think we will continue to grow. And I think in the next 365 days, before my contract expires, we will have this accomplished in half that time. And you'll start to see how we tie everything together and how big a part you play in that.
Questions for Andy?
Done.
Vice Mayor?
No, thank you.
I'm good. Thanks.
Scott?
So do we want to set some goals right now or? when do
No,
we-
I think we need to have individual conversations and
Okay.
in between now and next week, just start thinking about some things, and I'll have some things we'll put out in front of you. And I mean, it's pretty basic, but again, let's start. I think, Vice Mayor talks about, the 10,000 feet and not getting too granular. Let's get way up here and say, okay, we are developing a new town basically. And how are we
Mhm.
setting this new town up? And I think this gives us a great opportunity.
But do we need to look at dates for the whole group of us to meet again?
I think,
Or you want to do this other part?
yeah, I want to
first?
do this other first, and then we'll look at your calendars on those dates and see when people are free, and just kind of next week we'll zero in. You and I can talk. I know we got some things planned soon, so we'll get it figured out. Get something done in June for sure.
Very good. Next is the bicycle pedestrian plan. So I think this was kind of a group thing to talk about the bicycle ordinance, and as well the inside the packet is a study, an MPO study that was done from 2017. And I think if you've read through that, there's really a lot of good information, and a lot of it is obviously no longer relevant, and you can see some of the things that have played out from the vision from that MPO study, but there's still some gaps in there. I think there's things that could be done. So do we want to attack the bicycle ordinance first and then look into who's comfortable with that? Well, I'll just start.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I'll
that's
just
good.
start. And I, there's been the discussion with, e-bikes on the sidewalks and whether they should be or shouldn't be. And I tell you, I get more emails and conversations from people that no longer can ride a bike that doesn't have some sort of pedal assist. They need that, whether it's surgery, whether it's age, whatever it is, they need that assistance to be able to get around. And they would like to go from the south end to the north end, but they don't feel safe riding in the bike lanes, or they don't feel safe on the road. So they choose to take the sidewalk, but now are afraid that they're going to get a ticket for doing it.
And it just encourages more people to drive.
It does. It include, and I think if we truly want to follow what that study laid out, if we truly want to be a bicycle, walkable, friendly island, and I'll bring it up in a little while, there are certifications that you can actually get to say that you are that. I think it's a goal we should strive for, but it starts with this ordinance. And I think to the vice mayor has always said this, it's hard, you're always going to have some bad actors out there. And I think to create policy for a couple of bad actors, most people know what they're doing. Most people will be considerate. Most people will do the right thing. So to punish them, or to the mass versus the bad couple of actors, to me has never really made sense. I think there's a way that you can allow this to be a multi-use path on the sidewalk. Maybe and that's the discussion we'll have. Maybe it's just one section of the island where there's no bike paths, but or the beach, to me, that why can't you ride a bike on the beach? That's to me where you would want to try to.
Push people
That's
too.
where I would ride. That's where I ride. I mean,
First for me.
anyone that's ever ridden out there early in the morning and watched the dolphins swim right along. I mean, it's beautiful. So, but now again, not everyone can do that without some sort of assist.
Right.
They're not doing 25 miles an hour down the sidewalk or down the beach for that matter. So I'm certainly open to getting rid of that part of it. And if it's a part of the island where there's no bike lanes, or that's a discussion we have, but that's kind of my 2 cents on it then.
I think we have to make sure though, with any motorized vehicle on the sidewalk, they have to go through traffic because it's, you know, if you're going to go north, you got to be heading north. You can't be.
Oh, yeah,
be
flow
heading
of traffic.
the flow of traffic.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry,
Mhm.
because I've seen it where, you know, you look this way and here comes a guy flying on his bike and boom, and that's a safety thing. But if we can make it that they go with the flow of traffic and, you know, safety first as always, but, you know, we're hearing countless people. We've got them on the island. They want to spend money on the island. They don't want to cause traffic, and they choose to either drive and cause traffic or go somewhere else. And it's just doesn't seem to make sense to me. We need to really visit this.
Yeah, I mean, if people don't feel safe, and I understand there's some walkers that don't feel safe, but there's more, seems to me, at least from the communications I've had, there's been more bicyclists who don't feel safe, especially in the area where there's no bike lanes, that get up on the sidewalk and they don't care if they're going to get a ticket or not. So, but they're also considerate. They're not going 25 miles. They're, you know, they have bikes that the only way you get any power is if you pedal. And it's just that little bit of assistance they need to be able to get where they're going. If you're right, I mean, it is flat island, but when that wind's blowing in your face, it
Mhm.
can be difficult. So,
Let me-
Vice Mayor, go ahead, John.
Let me ask you this, because we've all been getting, I'm sure, both sides of the argument. Folks that are walking don't feel safe with these e-bikes or things on. Is this something we could set as, say, a year, get some data-driven, and come back and revisit it, and maybe that will help put some folks' minds at ease?
It's not a bad idea. I did at the public safety meeting, ask the fire
Right.
chief and,
Yeah, I
you know, for
watched.
data, and they really didn't have any data.
Right.
So I think to your point, yeah, if it's a change that we make, you know, keep the data on it for the next year and revisit it and,
Hmm.
you know, see what we find.
Thank you.
I mean, can we implement speed limits on the sidewalk?
According to the LCSO, that's not how the radar guns work.
I mean, you
Okay.
can do it, you just can't, it's hard to enforce.
It's hard
Can't
to enforce
Yeah,
it.
so they
Okay.
can't, the way the radar works, it can't pick up. At least that's how it was explained to me. So
Right.
it's a great idea and concept, but it wouldn't work.
If I could, I as both a walker on the sidewalks, runner and biker on the sidewalks, I wanted to ask the town attorney, and to the mayor's point, you're always going to have a knucklehead that's going to do bad things, and that's where enforcement comes in. But it has to be enforceable. It has to be a reason. I've talked to the sheriff's office at length about this, and there's some real veterans of our island who know what they can and can't enforce. But Nancy, if we put a proviso in the ordinance change that's required the biker to come to, whenever they're passing a pedestrian, again, to Scott's point, got to be flowing with the direction of traffic, but to come to a stop before they pass the pedestrian, is that something that can be done? And have other communities tried it in your experience?
I have not really heard of that being done. You know, can you do it? I would have to look into it. There's, you know, some of the requirements that you have in your code are actually in Florida statute. So we have to be very careful that we don't try to regulate an area that has already been preempted. So any change that we make here, I have to be very concerned with making sure we don't cross that line. I really hadn't heard of that. Do you have a community in mind? where
I
you've
don't,
heard
and
that?
I just, to me, again, having spent a lot of time on the sidewalks, the particularly with the new sidewalks south of Coconut Point, there is quite a bit of space on those sidewalks, and they're not terribly utilized, particularly in the off season. I mean, I can go from south to north at time and just maybe run into one or two pedestrians who are walking on the sidewalk. But the critical piece to me is when you're zipping along in your bike and somebody's trying to walk on that sidewalk, and I know people could ring the bell or they can holler on your left, and of course it startles the walker. And you've got pets, you've got children, but you know, common decency to me, and what I try to do is, first of all, I'll go into this, if it's off season, I'll just weave into the street and into the bike lane in the street and pass them on the street. But if that's not practical, we'll just come to a stop and we'll say, hey, we're just going to try to get around. We're on our bikes trying to get you around here, just on your left, and but we've come to a stop at that point. So we're not startling people. We're respecting their if they're walking their pet or they've got kids, and you just kind of, even if you just kind of with one foot on one pedal and one foot on the ground, just kind of push your way around on your bike, just scoot around them. Everybody's cool, and people are respected and people are respectful. Seems to me if we add that proviso, it isn't going to slow the biker down all that much because they've got to kind of slow down anyways to pass. But to come to a stop versus zipping by at 10 miles an hour, just ringing your bell or shouting on your left as you're zipping by, I think it would alleviate a lot of the stress and create a comity between our citizenship and our citizenry. And I think, I mean, just common decency and common sense comes into play here. But I do think that's something that could be enforceable. If a police officer or one of our enforcement team sees somebody zipping by somebody and they don't come to a stop when they're passing, that's an opportunity for enforcement there. So that's just that to me would really help me with this change. And I don't think it's a burden on the biker. And I think it would be of great comfort to the walker on the sidewalk. Just a suggestion.
I would support that. And I think to your point, we haven't fortunately had any accidents, but if we did have one, having that language in there would be an enforceable action that Lee County Sheriff's Office could do if there ever was an unfortunate incident, someone got hit, they could obviously tell that they weren't walking their bike by them. So I would support that language.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you feel, it seems to me like you feel that there's two separate issues here with the e-bikes. There's the beach and then there's the sidewalk, because I haven't heard anybody say, oh, gee whiz, the e-bikes are dangerous on the beach. I mean, can we maybe,
I have.
but there's, how do you capture, I mean, John's got a good point. You can capture data on a sidewalk and a street, but where would one capture data from a beach?
Well, I think that the only way on both the sidewalk or the beach, the only data you're going to be able to, at least in my mind, is if there was an accident.
Yeah.
Then
Right.
one, you would have, to the vice mayor's point, you would have something that could be enforceable and is very easily seen. And again, if there's an accident, that's data. That's data saying, it happened on the beach or it happened on the sidewalk. I'm in favor of both, allowing on both. I don't, to me, the beach is, especially after the renourishment, the beach is going to be beautiful and wide, and to be able to get out there and enjoy it and have a little bit of assistance to, again, it's promoting getting people out and allowing them to enjoy the 7 Mile Island that they choose to live on. And I support that. And I also support what the vice mayor is added as far as proviso language.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I try to be out there and do some cycling myself. And I have not seen that type of prohibition or a requirement that I stop when I approach others on either a bike path or on a sidewalk. So
This is just sidewalk.
Just the sidewalk.
Not in the street, obviously.
okay.
Because we have a bike lane.
I'm happy to look into it. What I have seen is the flip side of encouraging good behavior rather than prohibiting, the bad behavior, like share the road, share the path, that kind of thing. I'm sure you've seen signs like "Thank you for not smoking" instead of "Don't smoke." It's kind of the
Yeah,
flip
I think
side.
it's got to be tougher because
of gentler.
We did have I am aware of an incident where a splash pad was located very near a multi-use trail, and they did have accidents with children coming off the splash pad, being hit by cyclists coming through. That community addressed it through signage. Cyclists, slow down. You're coming into an area that's heavily congested. Share the road. I mean, that's the only thing that I have seen, but I'm perfectly willing to look to see if we can mandate something like a forced stop.
I think too, I'm really concerned about the beach piece because having lived on the beach literally for the last 6 years and gone up and down that beach, bike, run, swim, walk, the kids on the beach, you have to, when you're on the beach on a bike or running or even walking, you have to work under the premise that child will be definitely running in front of your path.
It's true.
It's an open space, it's a wild space, and so I think we probably, again, not to micromanage all this, but if the beach is what we bike on the beach every Saturday, we ride from the south end to the north end and back, and we do it we try to follow the tides. On low tide, and to the mayor's point, after renourishment, I mean, it's even going to be probably more dramatic, but you've got a significant space on that beach. So when we pass somebody on the beach on traditional bikes, we will pass at least 10 feet, probably more like 20 feet away from the person. We do the same for the birds. We do the same with the kids. We just slow down, period, because the kids, you just never know what they're going to do. But so the beach piece is really something we really need to be careful with, because well, that's the relaxation piece for our people. And that's when they're on that beach and they feel safe and they can relax, and you just let your mind roam. I mean, it's one thing on the sidewalk, you're sort of more alert on the sidewalk that, things are going to be happening, but on that beach, it's a different vibe, different presence. And I think we need to be very careful on the beach for the reasons which I stated. So I would like to see even probably stronger language on the beach. I don't know if stopping on the beach makes as much sense, but
Distance.
distance, yep, significant distance.
Well, they do that when boating and jet skiing. You can't go within so far of the shore. Maybe that's language that could be added, that you have to, if you're passing, you have to pass in a reasonable distance, whatever that is.
And if you can't, then you stop.
Then you stop.
Mhm.
But again, I think 99% of the people out there have enough common sense to do that. Most people that live on this island either have kids or grandkids, I would say. So they're,
Well,
they're
and people are
completely
going to say, the electric. There'll be some electric bike folks who will not go by this ordinance. Well, they're the same folks who are on the sidewalks already.
they're doing
now,
it. Right.
Right.
So that's enforcement. We've got to step up our enforcement, work with the sheriff.
And I think to your point, if education, encouragement, those are two things, but you have to be heavy handed, just like you have said before on the, I don't want to bring up turtle lighting, but the turtle lighting, you educate, you encourage, but the enforcement has to have some teeth. And I think making these changes or adding that would allow some teeth to the Lee County Sheriff's Department to be able to make sure that they don't do it again.
And this is, to me, is I used to be completely opposed to all this, but as I think about our traffic issues on this island, it's the number one quality of life issue on this island is our traffic congestion. And to give, this isn't going to solve all the world's problems, but anything we could do to mitigate that, to me, is important. But it really is going to, particularly from Coconut Point to Times Square, it's going to involve Mr. Town Manager and Frankie, who oversees our enforcement folks. It's going to involve some triaging, because those are very narrow sidewalks. So people are going to have to really, and I guess my other question is, if we do that, Nancy, can we also require that of traditional bikes? That may be preempted by state law. I don't know, but worth checking into,
Yes.
because I think everybody ought to have to go by those
If we can make a
rules.
distinction as to the capacity of the bicycle, because an e-bike's going to be able to go faster than a regular.
Right, but my point is that if we're going to have bikes on the sidewalk conduct this policy, we probably ought to have all bikes do that to make
I
the
would
walkers
agree.
feel safe, if we can. Well, the state may not allow us to do
Right.
that. But I do think, Frankie and Andy, with respect to, and this we're doing, I was going to get into this for our goals, but we need to be, I think we need, as a town, need to think about, this dovetails nicely what we're talking about, but it seems like this past traffic season, we were all kind of caught off guard by the enormity of the problem. And the sheriff's office was great to bring in some volunteers, and they had their folks. We had some folks out there, but I think we need to develop a strategy for next season to be more engaged. The sheriff's office can only do so much, but maybe if some of our town staff can be more engaged and employed in that, making sure folks cross at the crosswalks and making sure that, bad behavior doesn't slow traffic, and that the people, that somebody's managing those lights so that they're not turning red every time somebody wants to cross the road. We let people gather. It just seems like we need a bigger presence, and that bigger presence might be able to help enforce this bike ordinance as well, I think.
And I got a quick, just before you answer, just light bulb kind of went off my head. Is this something that would make sense to give to the Public Safety Committee to look into some sort of program? I've had retired police officers that live on the island that want to help, that want to do something, are willing to volunteer their time. Is there a program that maybe we could put in place during season, or we could have volunteers that have the expertise, that can be certified or trained to maybe work some of these crosswalks, or to help educate people that are willing to stand out there and willing to do it, and say, just so you can't ride on the sidewalk, or help direct traffic at the busy crosswalks that we know that we have, especially on the north end of the island. Is that something that one, you think would be a viable thing for the Public Safety Committee to work on? And two, is it something legally that we could do because they're a volunteer basis, or how would that work?
Well, you can use volunteers for a variety of things. They can't go into enforcement issues, but they can educate,
They can educate, they cannot
Mhm.
do traffic.
right?
So traffic is done by a law enforcement agency only or employees thereof. So the volunteers that the Lee County Sheriffs provide are still considered employees of the Lee County Sheriff's Department. We thought by going through and getting training, we have training, but our training does not allow us to overtake an intersection because we're not law officers. So that in lies makes our employees basically moot at this point. Sitting out at the crosswalks and advising, especially on busy situations closer to Margaritaville and up around the curve on North Estero, on San Carlos area, we can definitely have a buggy out there with our lights on and just telling people, please use the crosswalks as a group, those type of things. So the officer that is there
Or use
can
the
move people.
pedestrian, encourage them to use the pedestrian.
Pedestrian
overpass.
overwalk, yes,
Mhm.
yes, we can get the sandwich boards and I'll just have staff walking up and down.
There you go.
With sandwich boards, please use a pedestrian overpass. But as far as actually getting out and working the switch for the lights and
Yeah, I
working
get all that.
intersections, by law, we cannot do that unless we're employees of a law or agency.
Okay.
So one thing we're looking at with our emergency preparedness is a CERT program, Citizen Emergency Response Team.
We had it before the storm.
You had it before, and
Yeah.
we want to get that off and go have citizens go through the training through the state. It's a whole thing
Yeah.
with FEMA. I mean, it's a good thing. There are certain things that they can do as well. So that's kind of part of this process we're going through is how we can use that team, not only in a disaster, post it pre and post, but just day-to-day stuff, because they need to maintain a training and they need to maintain visibility and that kind of stuff. So I'll look and see if that responsibility is something that possibly could go out. But I like the idea you
Yeah,
had
they-
about
they-
the safety committee
I don't
going
remember
there.
when it kind of disbanded, but I know it was around in 2018 because we were able to, when Irma was coming, we were able to sign over our boat to CERT to say, we had it tied off, and after the storm, they had the right to go on and use it, if, for search and rescue and things like that. So I really like to hear that
Doesn't,
program will come back.
as you guys look at that at public safety, doesn't Sanibel have some kind of a
They-
volunteer corps?
They
that
might,
helps?
yeah.
They do, but they work for the Sanibel Police Department.
Is that right? So they're
Yes,
paid,
sir.
they're paid, they're not
Yes, sir.
volunteers?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. And even if they are volunteer, they still are
Under that
employed
law
by
enforcement.
them or under their guise. To that point, though, Mr. Mayor, in an emergency situation, any town employee is able to step up in an emergency situation and take control of an intersection.
Sure.
Like during a hurricane, during any kind of storm, any type of disaster that would encounter this island, any type of our town employee would be able to assume that role until Lee County Sheriff was here.
As you're doing your research, Nancy, if you could you also research what the rights are for the town to require bike rental companies to make sure that their customers sign off on, that they understand what the basic rules of the road are?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the rental bikes are going to be the biggest challenge, because these just folks, they just don't know our island.
I think most have it in their waiver, but
But you know that waivers,
Right. No, maybe it
print
needs
is
to be a
so-
a second.
Maybe a separate section that
Yeah.
has like the 3 bolt, got to stop when passing.
And then you got to initial it when you rent it.
something like that.
So you
yeah.
acknowledge it. Okay.
there's if you go, just before we move on to what Councilor Safford was talking about, if you go to packet page 40, it's on the next agenda item, or it's in this agenda item. Markings like that, I know we've talked in Public Safety Committee about, if you go down a little bit, you'll see there's 2 circles. One has a pedestrian in it with an arrow showing both directions. And then there's another one to the left that shows a circle with a bike in it with only one arrow going one direction, actually on the sidewalk. It's not a line all the way down the center with
Mhm.
something on each side. I got to believe that that's something the county we could talk to be on board with, to help educate that, bicycles go this way, traffic can go both ways. And it doesn't have to be every 5 feet, but it's something I think that could be on each block for sure.
Yeah.
In areas where it's a shared use, or even all the way up and down the island.
Definitely.
That would be, I don't see that the county would have an issue with that, but that's something I think that we could very easily implement. I don't know that it has to be in an ordinance, but
Mr. Mayor.
No, I
you-
mean, that's what I was going to go back to, is why not in the areas that we don't have bike lanes, to be able to divide the
Mhm.
sidewalks that we do have.
Yeah.
into.
And I know there was discussion on that picture on the left there that was talked about, and the county is like, we don't want to do a line all the way down the center, but something's,
Well, the
no,
picture on
most
the-
people don't look at the little signs. We used to put up the little tiny signs in the post.
Yep.
Nobody ever looked at
No.
those.
Yeah, but the picture on the right, though, although the guy's riding in the where he's supposed to be walking,
Right.
Exactly. That's not a good.
But there's nobody, but there's nobody there. But I think that tells you that, it's kind of like when you go to the airport and you got those there's always somebody standing in the walk
Mhm.
lane.
yeah,
And you
Right.
got, I mean, you can't fix everybody's mentality, but I think that to me
No,
makes more
that's
sense
simple.
having it there than
Yeah.
up on a sign that's like you're going the wrong way. Nobody's
Yeah.
looking up. They're looking at where they're at.
No, but that's simple and
Clean, easy.
Mhm.
inexpensive.
It's universal.
Yeah.
the line-
Everybody,
Everybody
nobody
sees-
has to read anything. They can just
No.
look at the picture.
And people are not usually looking up here, they're usually looking down.
Looking in
here.
front, and well, it's a friendly reminder. It's
Yes.
education
Mhm.
and it's
In your
encouragement.
face,
Yeah,
right,
it's
right.
to, hey, let's look over here,
So I keep thinking about what you said, Vice Mayor, about stopping and going around. I mean, I don't know how that would ever, I would just think stopping on the sidewalk. People don't stop on their bikes very eloquently. Usually they're falling over, they're tipping over. I just don't know how that
Well, I've-
piece of it would work.
I've thought about that, and it's a good question. I think you can do one of two things, and this would where Nancy would really need to be a wordsmith on this. But I think, as long as your foot, because your bike comes to a complete stop and your foot touches the ground, you can keep one foot on a pedal and then just kind of gently scoot around these folks. Or you could, if you're uncomfortable with that, or if the person's uncomfortable, they could literally get off their bike and just walk the bike around them. I think, again, for those bikers who think, oh, that's going to impede my speed, they can get back in the street and stay in the bike lane. Now, obviously, they don't have that luxury between Coconut Point and Times Square, but they're going to be a lot better off from a safety standpoint coming to a stop. Because, again, there's going to be, during season, there'll be a lot of pedestrians. Well,
Mhm.
you just walk your bike for a few blocks if there's a lot of pedestrians on the sidewalk. So, it just has to be sort of common sense, practical. But but again, I'll just tell you, during off season, you'll rarely ever have to come to a stop. There's
Right.
just nobody on the
I know
sidewalks.
that. Yeah, that's true.
Well, it depends on the time of day. I mean,
That's
Yeah.
true.
this morning, every morning I come here, I pass a lot of folks out walking on the
Yeah, or in the
sidewalks.
morning, John,
Mhm.
you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
But boy, when that heat comes out,
Yes, you're right.
It's vacant out there.
But what about, because we had talked about, and I think Dawn brought it up when she was reporting on the safety, about creating additional paths off of Estero Boulevard while it's open right now, being able to get permission and create those paths behind Estero Boulevard, not necessarily, opposite the beach.
If you go to, I'm glad you brought that up. So if you go to page 41, you can kind of see what was the envision of the comp plan
Mm-hmm,
was.
mm-hmm.
And if you kind of look in that map there, you'll see that pink area. That's what's in the comp plan. That was what was envisioned. And if you look at some of those areas where that's going through, to your point, there's a possibility to be able to get easements or.
Because there's
um,
a lot of that's empty right now.
Yeah. So, now is the time, if you're going to do it and you really
Mhm.
want to be walkable and bikeable, to look outside the box.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, if you read through that, it's a lot of reading, but if you read through it, there's a lot of state and federal grants that are available to be able to acquire things, to be able to make this happen.
Right.
I think the public when I was watching your public safety meeting, you guys were going to take that on as an agenda item, right? Looking for those alternative paths.
Yeah, they were going to do that. And I know that they were going to look specifically at this map because it relates to,
I think there'd be a lot of support for that. And again, just talking to the Seagate folks for the Red Coconut, they're
Mhm.
openly saying we would love to facilitate a
They
bike
want it.
path behind our property,
Right.
and we would be happy to. And that's a big piece of that puzzle because
Sure.
we can get people from Connecticut potentially all the way down to Bay Oaks and potentially down to Mango. If
Right.
you look at some of these opportunities, and some people are riding their bike just to enjoy riding their bike, and they're also trying to get from A to B, but they're also not in a super hurry. So to get off Estero and have that more relaxing ride, I think that would be very popular.
Well, and in this MPO study, it really relates to creating a destination. Essentially, you could create stops along the way. That's why we've talked about getting bike racks in areas and water stations in areas that promote people to get out there and ride. And along the way, you could do history of things along the area. And
Mhm.
I think that now is the time to do it. If we have any chance at all, now is the time to do it. And it connects up to the bigger plan that was out there statewide to be able to create a complete use path to be able to go all the way to Venice if you really wanted to on a bike. So we have some of it already in place coming over the bridge and obviously going north, but
To your point, Mr. Mayor, through the R2P2 project, those folks are going to be back in town here later this month. We had that preliminary discussion with them when they were here earlier in the spring, and they're on it. We looked at Lover's Lane. We looked at areas like that where we can connect behind potential development areas. And you're right, this is the time to strike while the iron's hot, right? And the iron is definitely hot on a lot of these projects. So they're on it. They got this plan. They've got these maps. They're trying to find a strategic way forward. And when they give us the outline, us as a community then can act on it.
When are they actually coming back?
They'll be here in, I think, about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
in 3 days, it's a 3-day.
It's going to be they're going to be on the ground 3 days. Yeah. And end of the month.
I don't remember what exactly days, but that's 3 days that they're going to be here. There's also, if you go to page 54, it's pretty interesting. There's two WFC and BFC. They're two programs, if you will, that you can really get certified in a walker-friendly island and biker-friendly island. And once you have these certifications, then you can actually promote that. You can advertise it that we are a walk-friendly island or we are a bike-friendly island. And it refers to it heavily inside this MPO study. I think that's something that we really should strive for. And it all ties into what we've been talking about, finding a continued use path to be able to allow you to go from north end. And I think with some of the changes that we are making or potentially going to make to the bike ordinance would help get us to be able to getting those certifications, to be able to put that on our website, to be able to put that up through the TDC, to be able to do that. I don't know that anyone else, maybe there is other communities around that in Lee County that have that. I don't know, but that was something that really caught my eye that could be a real beneficial thing, to your point, Andy, to make us be that place where, they're going to recognize that, because people that bike, they look for things like that. People that walk, they look for things like that.
Can I ask just a clarification, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly.
The, that page 40 that has the line down the middle of the sidewalk, if that's the path that forgive the pun, but if that's the path we're going to take, it kind of potentially then makes the stopping issue a little bit of a different issue. So if that's, is that what we're talking, is that what we're just kind of?
No, I was looking at this picture, the one on the right,
okay.
not this one.
Not this one.
This
okay.
one, this is just kind of that encouragement
Okay.
and, education that try to at least stay to one side, as opposed to riding down the center like the guy in the picture is doing. But
Okay. I just wanted to be
I
clear,
think it's just a friendly reminder. We've tried those signs in the past that you hang up on the, the street, and you're not looking up,
No,
you're looking in front of you.
In front of you.
So these would be reminders, and it's not, I know the county was not in favor of doing the picture on the left, the line down with the bikes.
Right.
But if we're able to create the ordinance that enforces the bike there or the sidewalk, I got to believe they would be in
Joint
favor
use.
of something that's, every block, if you do one or two of those on the block, to let people know that, there could potentially be bikers on the sidewalk. So stay to the right. Again, I use the example of the motorized walk paths in the airports that we've all used, and it's very simple, left and right, and you just train yourself to do that. And it goes along with everything. You're just trained now on it. I know I got to be on the left if I'm walking, and I know I got to be on the right if I'm
You
not touching it.
You've seen R2P2, June 11th to the 14th.
Right.
More than 2 weeks.
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, I'm not trying to monopolize all of it, but I just got a bunch of notes on pages of things that I think we could really do to encourage biking. If you go to page 57, I thought that thing caught my eye, and I think that's something that we could do now with the county to implement down in it's on page 57 and page 167. 167 actually has a better picture of what I'm talking about, or what they're talking about. It caught my eye. It's secured bike storage. It's a covered open area. If you look in there, the guy's actually locking his bike up, so he's stacking the bike. Something like that in Crescent Park or Lynn Hall Park or Newton Park, or something along the lines that encourages, again, people I now can take my bike on the trolley. If I'm coming to the island, I could get on the trolley with my bike from
Mhm.
Summerlin, come down to Newton Park or come down to something, take my bike off, lock it up secure, go to the beach, enjoy my day, and then bike home or take the trolley if I choose. I think that's something that we could do both in areas that we own, and I think the county
Mhm.
I think that's a really neat idea to be able to.
Yeah, Lynn Hall Park in
Lynn Hall Park.
particular.
It's on 167.
This would be good. This would be a good spot too, right? Right. I mean, we're redoing some
exactly.
things here. This is a great low.
And maybe not to that scale that's in the
Correct.
picture, but be able to provide a covered, safe area
Yeah, it's great.
to put your bike. You could add the water stations. You could,
Definitely set you apart.
I
Mhm.
mean, that, if I'm in Fort Myers or if I'm in Bonita and I want to come to the beach and you've got a bike that can get you here, but you got a place to securely lock it up. It's a glorified bike rack, but I think it's a really cool idea that would set us apart, to your point. That's something we could do fairly quickly and fairly inexpensive.
Who did those really cool bike racks that were,
I don't
they were at
know.
the library and they were metal and,
Like fish and all.
Yeah,
kinds
you,
of stuff.
you,
and
you can order
turtles.
those online. They're kind of, we still have some for our beach accesses, but you can, I've ordered those in other
mean,
towns,
those are
sharks
so
and
cool.
turtles and stuff. And
Yeah.
people just love that stuff.
Yeah.
It does promote.
Sure. I think that's before the storm, people were asking, or even something, a lot of people come to the island and they park their bikes because there's no place to park them. They lock them up on the other side of the bridge on the San Carlos Island side where our sign used to be twice. And they tie it to the bridge. Now that light's going to be put in there, now that, there's going to be a trolley stop there, all that stuff. Again, people can come, they could lock their bikes up securely, have a place to fill their water bottles, get a drink of water. I just think that that's a really cool idea that they came up with or showed a picture of. The other thing that caught my eye was on page 63, and this is for future, but as we go forward, it refers to TDC funding, and it gives examples of the city of Sanibel and the city of Cape Coral, how they got money to create videos, advertising videos to say, this is, you could have a video. If we got those markings on the sidewalk,
Mhm.
these videos could show this video. This is what you do on this side. This structure is for where you can lock your bike up. It's on this beach axis. So it's money, an additional revenue stream that we could get money back into the town through TDC funding to help offset some of these costs. So I just thought that was something that to keep in the back of our mind when next year when we go for TDC funding.
To that point, when I came down here 10 years ago, didn't know where Cape Coral was. And we Googled and it was a town video that they put out to their tourism development portion of the town.
Mhm.
And it was narrated by Terry Bradshaw, of all people,
Sure.
showing the highlights of Cape Coral. Unfortunately, they left out all the other spots once we got here, but that's neither here nor there. But yes, it was really well put together, and it does give people that aren't used to the area, especially if you're moving to an area or not even moving, but vacationing to an area, to give you a really nice overview of what you have, what you can get to, and how you can get there. And to your point, I think that would be very well received and very easily done.
Yeah, and on this page, it also refers to FDOT. There's actual FDOT grants out there that you could use. So maybe we could use some of that funding or go after some of that funding for the base of the bridge, since the bridge is FDOT's responsibility. Startup grants that allow you to start up some of these projects. So I think as we talk about being bike friendly and walk friendly, now's the time to really go after a lot of these grants and a lot of these things that could help get us to those certifications that would be part of those videos that we could get TDC funding for to produce and just really tell people, leave your cars, come by bike or take an Uber or take a shuttle, whatever it is to get here. And then once you're here, there's so many things you could do, but we're providing you the avenue to enjoy it once you're here. The other thing is just another 65. It talks about the MPO funds. And you go back and read this on your own, but it talks a lot about the MPO funds that you can go through to be able to get in transportation alternative funds that are available. So when you read through this, there is a plethora of grants and funding and things that could go out there to we aren't giving to the taxpayers of the island. We're getting funding to help promote exactly what we want to do that goes in line with our comp plan. So, and then the last one, and then I'll stop talking, I promise. The last one is that caught my eye is under the results. It says employer-based encouragement, business providing financial incentives or bike parking. And I think that's as we start to see some of these developments come in or some of these smaller scale to provoke or to get them to promote financially an incentive for people to come by bike. And that all again ties into if we can provide a safe place for them to lock their bikes up, and then they could bike home. It promotes all kinds of things, but it ties it all together with the employers that we have on the island to help promote through incentive-based things and with their employees to bring bikes and not cars goes a long way to offsetting the quality of life that the vice mayor has referred to many times.
One thing that I've mentioned as we start to transition to our new town hall and that possibly the concern of some of the employees about, the traffic is possibly having and it goes in line with what's in here is the storage area for bicycles. The town would have some bicycles for employees, or you could come park here and bike down there. You would beat traffic some because you could sit in traffic for an hour and you could bike probably in 15 minutes. So we could eliminate some of that. So just some things, a healthy lifestyle, that type of thing. We'll probably try to promote that a little bit too, and then try to generate that type of thing, not bike rentals, but just employee bikes. They could bring their own, or we would provide a few bikes.
Well, it'd be dual purpose. Then visitors and residents could also use a structure like that to be able to lock their bikes up.
That is correct.
If they don't have a safe place to do it, where I was saying or something, but. All right, that's all I had on my list of pages. It's actually a pretty interesting
It
reading.
is. It's a great read.
50% of it doesn't exist anymore. You see some of it
Right.
actually going through it, seeing some of the pictures of pre-storm. You're like, oh, and it shows pictures of what
The
Estero
cigar
Boulevard looked like before the
Oh,
widening of it. And it's like you
Yeah.
almost forget what it looked like
Oh, we
before.
had- in front of the Gypsy, it was gravel. You couldn't even.
Yeah, there was no way to walk around.
Right.
It was only on one side of the road. So if you have time, if you're out there listening and watching it, it's actually a pretty good read and to see how some of it has come to fruition, but there's still a long way to go. And now's the time to take advantage of it.
Before we move on, out in social media, and I think on Beach Talk Radio, folks had been talking about this issue and brought up a boardwalk on the beach. So I reached out to FDEP, and that's going to be a tall ask. I mean, I was just specifically asking for between Red Coconut and Times Square. And I had you all sent the long packet just for generically. She wanted more specifics, and I couldn't give her that. But they want the specifics. That you'd have to bring FWC involved in that. We'd have to, as a town, pay to have the area surveyed and have the results of that. So while it sounds like it's easy and wonderful, it's not as easy as it thinks. Well, because there's so many, it's the beach, so you have so many government agencies involved.
Well, one of the things going to tie into what you just brought up, I'm going to bring up for agenda management that you have in front of you. I think that could alleviate some of the questions and some of the answers that you have, but we'll talk about that when we get to agenda management. Anything else on this item? You have the direction that you need, Nancy, or any specific
Yes,
question?
and I'll go back and listen to the tape a couple more times.
Okay,
I'm good. Thank you.
all right.
Sorry.
All right, we'll move on. The next is the CRA. That is also something that I was working with staff to try to get on here to see if now is the time. Well, I believe now is the time to try to put forward with the CRA. And I'm not sure if it was Nancy or Becky that we
Nancy
were
and
talking,
Becky, yeah.
that we were talking to about this, and their suggestion, which to me makes sense, is to not have one CRA, but to have three. That way, funds that are raised in one section of the island stay.
Can you define your acronym for folks? who are
Yeah,
watching?
so I got it up here so that way I don't butcher it. So essentially a CRA is a community redevelopment agency. And what that does is it takes blighted areas that allow you to take the increase in the taxes. So when a CRA is set up, whatever increase in that tax base comes back to the town, specifically to the town, to work in areas that are within this CRA. And what I said earlier about Nancy and Becky both saying it makes sense for us because we certainly qualify for a blighted area. It's something that we would have to put together a plan and we'd have to do things to get it. And then it has to be approved through the county, but there's no time like the present to do it. And it would allow us as we develop back to be able to take the funding from that tax increase to be able to put it in 3 sections of the island that would allow us to help improve the island for specific things within that section. So I thought the 3 CRAs versus 1 island wide makes sense because then that eliminates well, why are you building something down at Santini with that TIF funding versus, up here? It just allows that money to stay in that bucket. So it was something that I wanted to have on here to see if there was an interest to pursue going down the avenue of having Nancy and Becky get this brought forward so that we could get it presented to the county. I would hope it would get approved because we certainly meet the blight requirement.
Mhm.
And there are more requirements in it, and maybe Nancy, you can go a little further
Okay,
than what I
when
did.
you do, Nancy, could you explain the difference between the CRA and a TIF, a tax increment financing district?
Okay, so so let me just back up and give you a little bit of a framework. So the CRA, from a legal perspective, is designated as a dependent special district. So it is basically another local governmental entity. So there is a board that is created for the agency. And there's a lot of requirements that you need to satisfy. But the first being whether or not the area is viewed as being a blighted area and a blighted or a slum area. And there is a statutory definition of that. The blighted area has a variety of conditions, which I think I agree with the mayor as far as the current state of the beach area, but also recently there was a determination that the lack of affordable housing could also be an indication of an area that's blighted. In defining if the area is blighted or not, you do have to get concurrence from the county. So before we go further down the road, there needs to be discussion and kind of see where the county is on this, if they agree to it or not, because that incremental amount that's coming off is coming off of the ad valorem taxes, which is then requiring them to reinvest it in the redevelopment area as opposed to someplace else in the county. So it is somewhat of a partnership, making sure that they're on the same page with the town. So once there's conversation, we need to have some type of a resolution or an interlocal agreement with the county to say that, yes, these areas, the 3 areas, you can do 3, are in a state of blight, consistent with what the statute says in 163. So once you get through that first hurdle, then you need to basically have a study done to show that from a planning perspective, from a data perspective, that yes, there is information and conditions that support the idea that there is a blighted area. Of course, there's a cost associated with that. So you want to make sure that the county is on board with you before you move through that process.
And Nancy, would that be that in the statute, it refers to it as a finding of necessity?
Yes.
Is that the finding of necessity is what we'd have to prepare to take to the county to get them on board with this before you moved on to the study?
I would have informal conversations with them
Okay.
first before you expend the money to
On the
do
finding.
the study, because if they think it's not blighted in their opinion, you're spending money for a study that
Makes
they may-
sense. Okay.
Yeah, that they may not agree with. So you're correct, though. The finding of necessity then is passed by resolution by this board, showing that it's a slum or blighted area, or there's a shortage of affordable housing. But again, it has to be based on a study. And then at that point, once you've overcome that hurdle with the resolution, then you move forward and you have to create an entity, the CRA board or agency, which generally are local government
It's you.
councils. Yeah.
It's you.
So it would be you, but you are functioning as a separate
Right.
local government. And that happens quite frequently. The statute also provides that you can add, I think, 2 additional members to the CRA board to function. Sometimes a county will add their person because, again, there is kind of a little partnership in that regard. So once the CRA is formed and the body is created, they have to begin developing a plan. And the plan basically has to be very, I would say, pretty specific, because that increment that you acquire down the road can only be spent on if it's projects that are in your plan. If it's not in the plan, it doesn't work. When your plan is very specific, it's easy because, okay, we have this much money, we're going to use it for this purpose. Sometimes you put some vague language in there and then it becomes debatable. Can you actually use that to accomplish that goal? The plan has to be approved by the county or the taxing authority as well. So again, they're giving up that increment, but they want to know what it's going to be spent for. So it kind of goes in that regard. Once you've overcome those hurdles, then you need to basically create a trust fund. And that trust fund is where the money is gathered, and it could be spent on an annual basis for things that are in your plan, or you can allow it to build up a little bit and then use it for a larger project. You could use part of it for a larger project with grants or other funding sources as well, to try to move forward in that direction. So your CRA plan has to be consistent with your comprehensive plan that you all just reviewed some changes for on Monday. And, you know, it ties together with everything. Your bicycle plan that you're just talking about, that could be part of it and rolled into it. And then on the financial side, you know, we would create the fund, and determining how much money you actually get, that's a little bit above my pay grade. I did a little bit of research, and there's more research that needs to be done, but it does look like Lee County did have a CRA they created back in 1990. And part of their CRA included the Estero Island as well as San Carlos Island, which I thought was rather interesting. However, they rescinded and abolished those CRAs back in 2006, stating that there was no money available for the projects. So moving forward, we would kind of like to see what was in that initial plan for Estero Island and see if we can't maybe build upon that. Just like in your bicycle plan from 2017, there's things that are good, but there's things that are outdated. So that's kind of what I can contribute today.
I'll tell you,
Just real quick, Scott, would you just comment on the difference between the CRA and the TIF concept, the tax
The TIF
increment financing?
The TIF is part of the CRA. So the CRA is developed, is created, the boundary lines are established, and there is a baseline of what the ad valorem revenue is from that particular area. And then over time, as properties are redeveloped, it begins to increase, and then that increment is what goes into the trust fund that can then be spent specifically in that area.
So you can't have a TIF without a CRA, because
Correct.
in my home state of Indiana, we would have a TIF and not have a CRA. So
I don't
But in
think you
Florida,
can do
I'm just
that.
trying to understand the difference. Thank you. Yep.
no.
And also they're typically, they sunset and usually no more than 30 years. They don't go on forever.
Yes, but there's all kinds of things you can do within your CRA plan. A lot of flexibility. But for instance, you can have additional code enforcement officers, but that code enforcement officer, the salary that's paid has to be specific for code enforcement work within that CRA area. It can't be for, you know, in general in the town.
I mean, the city of Fort Myers has just an incredible CRA plan. I think they have 4 different zoning districts. They have MLK, they have Cleveland Avenue, downtown. There's a guy named Lee Ford he's not on the commission there, but he knows the ins and outs of CRAs, and maybe next M&P we get him to give some insight.
Well, I
There
think
is
that-
a community redevelopment association associated with the Florida League of Cities, and they have highlighted Fort Myers as being an example for other communities to follow. Cape Coral also has a CRA, but the other communities within Lee County, I'm not aware of
Yeah.
them
I
having.
mean, and Teresa
CRAs.
Brown, I think, is the chair of the CRA there, and she presented at Leadership League when we did Fort Myers Day, and it was and it was brought up. Gosh, I mean, Fort Myers Beach would be, given the hurricane, would be a perfect place for a successful CRA.
Yeah,
And we have neighbors right, just north of us that work with the county all the time, and I think we could get a lot of help from them.
yeah. Well, to Nancy's point, I think the first step is getting informal conversations with our county commissioners and I would certainly support doing that, whether it's the staff or a designated person from the council to do it. To be able to at least have those initial concepts. If they all say no, then we're kind of going nowhere fast. But I don't believe that would be an answer. I would think that dealing with what we've had to deal with, they would be certainly receptive to the idea of doing
I
it.
agree with you. And they have assets here. They have Estero Boulevard,
Sure,
they
the
have the
parks,
pier,
yeah.
and which would benefit from this area or certain nodes being identified as CRA and having money diverted there.
Is there a consensus to start the initial talks at least?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And who's doing that?
Mayor, I'd be happy to facilitate, but I think it would be incumbent upon one of you, because of the elected official level of discussion, to designate one of you to participate with me.
How do you feel about that, Mayor?
I'd certainly be happy to do it. I talk to them all the time anyway, so I know we all do. But if everyone's okay with it, I'd be happy to
I
at
can do
least
it.
get the initial talking going and see what they say.
Yeah, I'll try to get you with Lee Ford as well. Recommend you contact him.
Sure.
Yeah, he's that guy. He knows his stuff inside and out.
Yeah, I agree. And all the help we can get, getting the 5 on board first is the important part. And then,
Right.
and knowing, and we, to your point, we did have a CRA before.
Yes.
I know in 99 there was one, but they since have gotten rid of it, but now's the time to bring it back, I think.
So we'll continue our research and we'll also try to start working on perhaps some documents. So if you get a positive response, we
Okay.
can try to move quickly.
Sounds good. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to the next thing. Estero Boulevard landscaping. Who wants to start this one? Anyone? Okay, I'll do it, I guess. Go ahead,
Well, I
Vice Mayor.
was going to ask the town manager, and again, you guys have had your hands full, but what is the plan? Whatever we planted prior to the storm was not overwhelmingly impressive. And so do we have a plan and I mean, what do you guys, I mean, you're the professionals and we've got Mark over here. Or
I'm going to ask Jason if he doesn't mind. He's been part of the whole, and he educated me on where we were at this point when I got here. So do you mind, Jason, just kind of
Well,
talk? And we
if
probably
you-
need to go to the,
If you remember, Vice Mayor, it came before us and there was a discussion about letting the homeowners on Estero Boulevard do what they wanted to do to, obviously within the guidance of whatever the town put out. And at the time, there wasn't an interest in allowing each homeowner to do, basically to make it an extension of their lawn. I was walking north of Estero Boulevard yesterday and I can't remember what her name is, but sweet lady that lives there.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't seen what she's done in her little section, it's very cool. There's a lot of work and effort that had gone into that. And I think that's something we should relook at. I know we had voted no against it in the past, but something like that would be really, really cool to be able to.
Well, even going down Bonita Beach Road,
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's all this hype about Bonita Beach Road, but those yards and that landscaping that they have done, and sometimes 3 or 4 homes go together and they provide the same kind of buffer and everything. It's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, it's pride and ownership too. Then it's part of it's an extension of their
Right.
front
so
yard.
some of the work had been done at Lazy Way, right? Looks like there's $34,000 that of the original 820 was spent there.
That one will.
RCL fund,
double check.
ALUCES and CHRTEL.
Yeah, that was, from what I know, that was right about probably last summer, right before Ian. The town, I believe, completed the first segment which was from Red
Probably it.
Coconut to about Newton Park
Okay.
Publix
And
area.
it was just all perennial peanut,
Yeah, it
right?
was, I think
It's
Sunshine
just,
Mimosa and
oh,
Perennial
gotcha.
Peanut. So that was a project we kind of took over, afterwards. So we completed that part, and then Ian came. So
Yeah, we were
that's-
working our way south.
Yeah, and I believe Joe has the actual numbers of how much we've spent on that, but I believe it was only a small portion of it compared to the total amount that we got. The town executed that interlocal, I believe, with the county where we got that money from then to basically install and maintain the landscaping along the Estero Boulevard for the county.
Are
So-
you the point person on this, Jason?
I was, and I have the information, but I'm happy to help.
But I guess
or,
my
or try
question
and
is,
guide.
are you interfacing with the garden club?
I have not recently, but I know
Okay.
we're kind of all working together on that. So
Mark will actually take the lead as we move forward. He's been here a couple months and
Well, Mark, you've got about a couple years of experience in life. Do you have a vision for
Wow,
landscaping?
that was kind.
Well, I think you guys didn't get a chance to see it, but before the storm, North Estero Boulevard was beautiful.
yes,
It had palm trees, it had
It was gorgeous.
vegetation. It was a true separation
Mhm.
that people didn't just walk through to get out onto the road because it was beautiful.
yeah, Stephanie
And to
took
me,
a lot
I
of time
kept
to put that
arguing
together.
Oh, okay.
before the storm
Yep.
to previous city administrator, we've got a roadmap. It's right in front of us. What, just extend
Sure.
it down. I mean, it was beautiful. And it, ran into brick walls with it, but we ended up with perennial peanut. But I think, to your
Which
point,
looks like woods.
recommendations, what we had there, I thought was beautiful. And if you actually look at the comprehensive plan, it refers to Estero Boulevard as the Isle of Palms. And it
There's royal
references
palms up and
having
down
royal
it,
palms
yeah.
down there, which is kind of what North Estero had.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that it has to be just palm trees,
Sure.
but I mean, if we had some pictures
Yeah.
of what North
Oh,
Estero
yeah, I
looked
definitely
like,
definitely do. Yeah.
I think that could be something to build off of because I don't know anyone that thought it was horrendous and ugly what it looked like on the north end of the island.
county's already blessed this because they gave us the money, obviously. So it's not like we got to go back to them to do, but if we have to cut into the sidewalk and things like that, I imagine we'd have to get their blessing to do that
would
because
imagine.
you'd have to cut into some of the places to put palm trees and as you move down, I would imagine, or whatever we did. I'm not saying palm trees. I'm just saying whatever we did was determined to go in. I imagine the garden club has had input with that in the past, or how did that?
I believe it went to council just for a recommendation from what I understand of the Sunshine Mimosa and the Perennial Peanut, just for that first segment.
Yeah.
And that's really as far as we got before Ian from
Okay.
my recollection is we got basically to Publix and then it was kind of, next phase was going to be,
And it was
After that.
it was a maintenance nightmare. You saw poor public works out there every day on their hands and
Where
knees in the
weeding
bike
and-
lane,
yep.
which is safe. Trimming the perennial peanut that's grown over the sidewalk and
Yeah.
grown over
which,
the-
which didn't even look nice.
Well, a
it
lot of
looked-
those native plants don't look nice. I mean, we got to be really specific about what we want this to look
Absolutely,
like. Or they
and-
turn
and-
into weeds.
and like the mayor said, the maintenance aspect of it too, making
Yeah.
sure that it's able to be maintained with our staff.
To your point, we have already reached out with Chad, our environmental manager, and looked at Tree City USA to try to get tree grants for North Estero. He has gotten the preliminary kickoff, so to speak, as far as getting the paperwork in, doing that, and that would have been replacing all that North Estero with royal palms that were there.
Yeah, I think
So-
if we can get, at least my personal opinion, if we can get pictures of what North Estero looked like so that staff can look at it and make
It was
recommendations.
so pretty.
It was beautiful. And I think be able to, again, why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
If it was
To
there.
your point, you had a roadmap.
Right.
And I
Just
think
keep going.
it was multi-purpose to the vice mayor's point. It's, to keep, without physical hard barrier guardrails to keep people from getting, it really worked. It created that separation. And as you got to the south end of the island, it's even more of an area. So,
And some shade.
and some shade,
Mhm.
absolutely, be able to provide some palm trees for some shade to be able to,
Yeah.
to walk down the sidewalk and help block some of that wind and the sand that we're seeing blowing out on the boulevard. But I think now is the time to really, get going on this so that we can, it's your first impression when you're driving down Estero
Rainy
Boulevard.
season.
Well, and rainy season too, yeah. But there's going to be some maintenance involved if we're not doing just the native plants which are beautiful, but I think we can,
Yeah, that and the watering. I mean, those were the two issues we had before of just, making sure everything's getting water when everything's newly planted and then just maintaining it with the weeds and, trimming and all that too. So.
Did you have a thought, Mark? You were nodding your head.
No.
Or you're just listening?
I know that's a really long sprinkler system and
I can do it. I can do it. No, I do remember North Estero. It was beautiful. And the issue is that we need a little bit of a grass area between the sidewalk and the road because that's where it is. But I think to get the garden club involved, I have been in touch with Kathy on a few projects. So we have a good rapport with each other. I think to get them involved and try to really promote the homeowners to take grasp of it, be proud of what they are. I want somebody walking by my house, me at night walking by my house. Like you say, I know that one on North
Yeah.
Estero, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's only
One
maybe
section.
10, 15 feet. We need everybody to jump on
Mhm.
board. And I think if we can promote that, and I think the garden club will help promote that too
Sure.
with the people. So that's really where my vision is going. But checking Google Maps. Google Maps have maps going back to 2017. And you can look up and down the boulevard and see what it looks like. So I think that'll give us some good direction.
But I think the point was to Councilor Woodson is native plants are beautiful and they're great, but I think not all of those were native plants that required some watering, but
Yes.
staff was obviously watering it because they stayed beautiful all the time. They were never overgrown. They were never, I don't know. I just keep thinking it
Yeah.
was right in front of us. It's right there. What we don't have.
But we have seen, like, the county has a big water truck and they go once a week and they water their plants. So once a week with a water truck, boom, 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 shouldn't be too
We'll-
big of an issue.
We'll start working on a plan because obviously we have to have RFP out for,
Yes.
that volume of trees and that type of thing. And
Sure.
who's going to, so we'll start that process and be working to bring something back to you as soon as we can.
And now's the time to start on it with the traffic is light. Any other input?
It's a complete coincidence, but perennial peanut is going to be my next honor name when I get back into the business.
Oh, don't even start. There's so many jokes there, John. Come on. Anything else for that?
There it is. Look at
All
that
right.
right in front of you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it gives you, you can see up
Miracle
there.
on television.
That's one section.
I think they're looking at.
Who's doing, can you move it down, Jacob, as you kind of go down the boulevard? Give him an idea of,
You're right.
Don't go too fast. They get car sick.
Jim, you're right. Jim, look how it controls the foot pedestrian
yes.
cars.
Would help on foot traffic.
and the
Mhm.
trees are just, I mean, it's beautiful. It ties into McGregor. McGregor is like
Yeah.
that. And
Those were not coconut palms. I rest
Yeah.
my case.
yeah,
There's some already out there, but
But
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Wow, look at, man, really?
There's the water tower.
Was that?
Yeah.
That's
Right
what the
on
water
fence.
tower looked like?
yeah.
Why, put it back there and take the.
Mhm.
You know it, and I know it. But yeah.
I'm sorry,
See, but
what?
I mean, it's something that's very easy to do. It's already there.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And it wasn't all the same. It was different
Right.
everywhere. It was a little,
Right. Each little pad was different.
And it's
but I
not
love
that-
the idea of having the palm trees down the boulevard for
Mhm.
shade.
And some of them aren't those high growth.
And
type things
protection.
that'll take
A lot,
off.
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people
Look at the
feel
bushes,
threatened by
but
the,
I mean, even
the
the smaller
proximity of the
areas have
cars, and the
something.
trees help give you a layer
Well,
of
it's
protection.
safety too.
Yeah.
Right now, there's really no safety barrier between other than the curb.
Right.
Exactly. We don't like mulch.
We
For the
definitely
storm.
can go,
Yeah.
with the French drain system
So-
all the way up and down.
I see like those hedges there too. People
Yeah.
just didn't walk through.
Yeah, it's
You
a
know,
good
that kind of
natural
thing.
buffer.
And they're
Love-
cut low
love-
enough so
love the
that they
hedge,
don't
yeah.
impede your view when you
Right.
come up to a stop sign to be able to
Mhm.
turn. Yeah, there's going to be
Not
some
size
maintenance
gorgeous.
involved, but I think that,
That's fine.
Everyone.
I think you'll find homeowners will help maintain it too, just because they want
Is
it.
that your perennial
Mhm.
peanut?
Yeah, everyone will. Oh, there's one
This
tree.
is taking a
I
trip
got
down
you,
memory
man.
lane.
Isn't it? I know, you just look at it and think, God.
But for the most
I'll
part,
change
it's
next
all,
week.
It's gumbo
amazing.
limbo right there.
Never seen.
You know,
All
it's
right.
very good. I love gumbo limbo.
Do you?
Especially with a little sausage.
See how green everything was.
I
Yeah.
know, it was
And,
beautiful.
And
what's the
do?
proper pronunciation? You talk.
You guys think you got it under control?
We got
from
her.
here? Thanks, Jacob, for pulling that. It's a great idea. Wait a minute, wasn't that you driving? Frank? No.
I don't know, was it crazy
Yeah,
or what?
it was on the sidewalk.
Oh, that could be.
All right, next,
I did that at
agenda,
Lover's Key.
agenda management. Counselor Safford, we'll start with you.
I'm good.
Counselor Woodson?
I wanted to bring up one thing, and more of it's from historical because I don't understand the whole history of the rentals being weekly and monthly. And monthly is so few and far between. And I guess some education on how that all came about. And is that what we want to continue, or just where we sit on that.
It's my recollection on the streets that are designated. We talked about this way before the storm. I thought about looking at the monthly streets specifically and just changing. I think it was like something in there that we were going to change to specifically not go from a month could be from July 7th to August 7th, or, whatever, instead of being the first till the end. So April is April, so if you rent in there in a month, the question was, can we change it to, if I don't have a rental in July and they come in on July 28th, can my month be till August 28th? And it was sent up to the Attorney General's office, and I believe they came back saying, no, if you change one word within your ordinance that is in place, you lose your grandfather's status.
Right, but what's even crazier is that ordinance that's still on the books still says you cannot rent to anybody that's not blood related.
Yeah.
And that is so wrong on so many levels.
Mhm.
4 guys can't come down and play golf. 5 ladies can't come down for a bachelorette party. Then
But I
you-
think,
you-
I
then you
think
get-
we talked about that too, though. And I think the word there was the rent. You can't charge rent to blood relatives, wasn't it?
No, they only wanted families coming down here. And that's that. I mean, to Karen's point, I think we just need to revisit it. But you can't have an ordinance on the books that's so antiquated like that.
Right.
Or
one side of the co- one side of
and
the
you're
street
and you're
wide.
and you're just you're enforcing portions of it, but you're ignoring other portions. I mean, an ordinance should be written where it's you can't pick and choose what you're going to enforce. So I think we couldn't change it because we'd lose our grandfather clause. But again, to Councilor Woodson's point, I think we need to revisit this. And after the storm, do we still need monthly streets?
Well, I think if you ask people that live on those monthly streets, the answer would be yes, because that's why they
Very,
bought there.
very well, but I think we should have the conversation.
I don't disagree.
But
I don't
the people
disagree.
trying to sell their house, it's almost the point now where if people are looking at houses for investment properties, the weekly streets are worth more.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and they were before the storm, but I think people that were looking to invest were buying specifically for. We can have this
Yeah.
discussion, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to have the conversation.
But how
I
did-
totally agree.
I mean, I don't
certainly
understand
wanna
how
lose
it
our
even.
grandfather.
Well, and
No.
the other portion about this, Councilor Woodson, is that, there's a bill on the governor's desk that may change how short-term rentals are governed by the state, and we need to have a serious discussion about what the impacts on the town will be. And,
Yeah.
I'm all about, protecting people's property rights and everything else, but this is going to be a very interesting issue that I think we need to, at least in an M&P meeting, talk about it.
Yeah,
Right.
I think what's on the governor's desk, because of the year that our ordinance was intact, wouldn't affect us. If I remember reading
I
it,
think you're grandfathered, yeah.
I think we're grandfather. I mean, there's been a push in Tallahassee for years to try to
Every
take
year.
over home rule.
Every
And this,
year.
every year it's something, and it changes and it changes and it changes. And that's why the Florida League of Cities pushes so hard to not allow that to go away. So I'm completely open to having discussion, and if there's words that can be changed and it doesn't affect our grandfather status, then let's have those. But I know that one specific thing was sent up to the AG's office and changing the wording, and their response was very specific. If you change one word in your ordinance, you lose your grandfather status. At least that's what our council at the time told us.
Yeah.
So
I would beg to
So
have
to
that
have-
relooked at, please.
Okay.
because I think and maybe Jim, you can remember, I think there was a willingness at the time to look at, if it's still a month, a month is a month, whether it's the 15th to the 15th or, so I think there was a willingness to do that. And that's how it ended up going up to the AG's to get a ruling on it. But again, we were informed that they said, no, you can't change one word. So certainly take a look at it again. I think new council with new fresh eyes looking at something like this is
Yeah,
not a
and
bad
it
idea.
is a discussion to have, because again, every year there's a push to try to take away a little bit more. So we have to constantly monitor that.
Mhm.
But I think we also have to be very careful that we're not
We don't lose anything.
giving away, we're not
Yeah,
helping the
no.
cause.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
we're not
absolutely.
helping the cause. Anything else?
Nope, that was it.
You guys got that? Okay. Vice Mayor Adderholt?
I think it's still on the list, but it just at some point, whenever the appropriate time is, the contractor who's installing the street lights, just to have them come in and just give a little presentation, show a little bit about, I mean, it's a Herculean effort.
I've reached out to Chris Powell and asked him, he's checking his schedule when he can get
the
in
next
here, and we'll
That's
coordinate
fine.
it and get
Yeah.
him in
More
here.
than next.
That's great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Vice Mayor, or I'm going the wrong way. Counselor King?
Or perennial peanut
Perennial
if you
peanut, I
choose.
think,
Okay, whatever you
Um,
want.
I'm trying to go by my memory, so this is going to hurt,
Oh.
but we brought on policies and procedures up to date as far as committees. But as I recall, it's still in conflict with the town ordinance that says you have to be either a voter or a property owner to serve on a committee. And I think we need either, we can continue to ignore it or at least address it in the ordinance, because we do have folks that are not either serving on various committees.
Just need,
Yep, I agree with that one.
all right, that's 2 people to get it put on there to take a look at.
Yep.
Jim, or
That's it for
perennial
me.
peanut?
That's it for me.
Just call him Peanut.
PP short, PP out.
P squared.
I
P
just,
squared. Yeah.
I just have 2 things that you have in front of you that I wanted to bring to see if it's something we want to put on agenda management or not. The first one is kind of some just brief renderings. I met with someone that specializes in workforce housing to look at areas and discuss things. And with the CDBD GR funding that's out there, there's an opportunity to get some money. It's a very short window, but there's an opportunity to be able to get a large sum of money from that towards workforce housing. You know, we talk a lot about now's the time to do some things. Is now the time to do some things? And what you have in front of you is the old town hall property. And it's just kind of a basic rendering. And in talking with him, trying to understand how this works and what doesn't work and what the town needs, what you kind of see in front of you is something that could be 80 units with some parking, and then commercial in the front, and then the back, which is not on there because he ran out of time to do it. But it could be green space, it could be park, it could be usable. So it would be something that the entire community could benefit from. Obviously, they come in, it would be some sort of, I guess what I'm trying to get at, I don't want to get too much into it, but in these drawings, it kind of shows you that there's a workforce housing, there's commercial, there's green space, all of it within that town hall property. And is there a willingness to at least have the discussion, have him come in, present to the council, this is how it works, this is how the town would be involved, this is what we pay for, all of that, and kind of explain it, because he would do it much better than I could, to at least look at it, because the window is very, very short to be able to get these CD, or at least apply to get the funding, which could offset a lot of costs of this. And it is a property that we already own, so that eliminates a lot of that cost. And there was talk when I was talking with him about, there's never been anything done that I can find, or anyone, or he can find, workforce housing that it doesn't promote cars, it doesn't promote the parking, it stays open, so it's bicycle only, and can that be done through CDBGR? So there's a lot of things in there that could potentially benefit the town. There was discussions about underneath, everything has to be elevated, obviously, but underneath could be an open area park where you could use it for rain events, or you could use it there's all kinds of opportunities that you could do there. But if there's not a willingness to have the discussion, or at least have him make a presentation, then we won't go any further with it. But I wanted to bring it before council to see if there was at least one other person willing to have him come in, and I believe it's the end of June when you have to, is that right, Frankie, to be able to have some paperwork in?
We're gonna have to have it in quite a bit before that, but June 29th is the final.
So
review date.
if there's I mean, I don't know that we'd have time to get it on the next M&P. If there's a willingness to go forward with it, maybe it's something he could come in and do a presentation on, at the beginning of the next meeting or the meeting after that. Just in the presentation part of it, it would be very brief. It's not a sales pitch. It's not anything, but if we're serious about trying to keep some of I look at it as a benefit of having, you could really direct quality people to the island. There are 1, 2, 3 bedroom units and kind of this design that would help promote some kids back to the school, help maybe get some of that enrollment number up on the island. But I think there's a lot of potential benefits to at least have the discussion. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if someone else agrees,
Who manages this though? Like,
so if the town would have really nothing to do with it, other than we'd have to oversee it, is my understanding. But we would hire them or they would be hired as a firm to do it. The town would be essentially just a long-term lease of the property. Anything that was to happen with the property, the town would still, it's all how you write it into the agreement.
Yeah, it's
Nancy,
a
it-
public-private partnership.
Exactly. So it'd be, so the town would still have stake in every, if it was ever to be sold 20, 30 years from now, the town would be involved in getting money. So it would be something, but I thought it was important when I initially talked to him, he had just kind of workforce housing. And I thought, we're talking about trying to spread out some of this walkability and commercial use for small scale essential businesses that we're talking about, dentist office, haircut place, something like that. That could be a good spot for things like that. So I just thought it would be interesting to at least talk about, especially with the funding that's available through CDBGR, potentially available. So that's kind of my pitch to see if anyone else thinks it's a worthwhile.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. When you had that conversation with this person, did you have a comfort level that this would actually be distinguished as workforce housing versus low income housing?
Yes, it was workforce housing. And again, I don't know the intricacies of how that works as far as getting the funding through HUD, but it's set up where there was so much information. That's why I said it'd be interesting. He'd be able to, but it was,
Certainly be
but
happy to
how
listen.
in the workforce part, at least what I remember, what I got out of it was it's protected. So when you have to have, I think it was $52,000 or something like that is the threshold for a family of two or something, could qualify technically to be one.
But you'd have to be employed.
But you have to be employed.
We're allowed to
Yes.
require
You'd
that?
have to be
Okay.
employed. You can't specifically, at least the way I remember it, you can't specifically say it has to be only for Fort Myers Beach residents. But if you're
Then
living
what
there,
would,
you'd
what
be.
would
res-
prevent somebody that lives way out?
Right.
Hey, man, I get a cheap place to live on the beach now, and they're not working. I mean,
Well, he explained that, and there's ways that you can do it that it allows people that live on the island, work on the island first. The idea is to get quality people here to work.
well, yeah, that's. I mean, the goal is to get quality people, but if you got to have that protection where it's just, hey, man, you can get a cheap place on the beach now.
Well, that's well,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
protected. That's protected by
And then
the cost.
I guess my other question, Mr. Mayor, is who actually does the screening of the applicants?
It's all regular. Again, this is why I wanted to have
Yeah, I
because
mean,
these are all questions he could answer better than I could. But I asked a lot of the similar questions and the answers. I mean, this was only about, he did this literally after an hour meeting with him, just standing at the site, looking at it. He kind of sent this out. And that's why I talked about is now a time to try to do something that doesn't have any parking. So if you're living there, you don't have a place to park your car. So you're going to want to be working within biking distance of the, I mean, you're not going to bike to the Lehigh Acres and live here, right? So is there ways to do it where you really kind of entice people that live and work around, not just Fort Myers Beach, but, San Carlos Island, Sanibel? It's something that we have the opportunity to do it. Does it make sense to look at it and see if it's viable? And he would be able to answer your questions way better than I would. And
Certainly I'd be willing to listen to that. That's sure. I mean, the proximity to the school is really interesting as well.
that was one of the main things I looked at is, we're kind of running out of time to try to build up that enrollment. This could be a potential way to, developers that are.
I agree. I mean, if our goal is to increase enrollment in the school and
Right.
provide workforce housing, we definitely should, open up that conversation.
Yeah, I just don't in any way, shape, or form want to see us being the lease negotiator, the whole, the
No,
whole,
I agree.
that kind
And
of thing.
I don't want-
That's not our
If
place.
it's going to cost the town money,
Yeah, I don't want the
a
town,
lot of
I don't want the
money,
town to be
no.
in the housing business. That's
Right.
not what
Thank
we
you.
don't want them in the housing.
that was one of the first questions I said, would
Yeah.
the town have to manage this? And he's like, no, absolutely not. And another thing, and he explained to me that I thought was very interesting is, your qualifications is say 52,000 or whatever that number was. Through HUD, you can go up to 150% of whatever that number is. And the reason that's there, workforce housing, I think it is versus affordable housing, is because people, what happens is I don't want to use the word squatter, but that's the best word I can use of, they don't want to take promotions. They don't want to increase because they lose where they live then.
Mm.
So this allows up to 50% over that number to be able to allow you to get more money, to be able to take promotions, to be able to incentivize you to get better, to better raise more money for your family, however you want to put it, to be able to move on. If this has anything to do with just having people come to live here just to have a cheap place on the beach, it's not
That's not what it's
That's
for.
not what it's for. So, and there's so much that goes into it. It's not something that you could cover in the 10 minutes we've been talking about it, but I think this is what he does. So I think having him come in and have the conversation and say, here's how that gets paid for. Here's how the town's involvement in it. Here's how you have some of the backdrops or backstops that we're talking about. And here's what you cannot do. You can't do this because of HUD. You can't do this. But so it kind of came up pretty quick, and I didn't know anything at the time when I met with him that there was this funding out there through the DR funding to be able to get some. And going forward, if I'm not mistaken, Frankie, just through the CDBG part of it, which we're now going to go back into, there's funding through that program to be able to do it
You
as
are
well.
correct, sir. And also this would fit into the CDBGR under affordable housing. That's how they group it. That's the grouping that they designate. But they have pretty stringent on federal level because it is federal project money that you're using for RFP, putting the proper procurement process in place.
Sure.
And that is pretty lengthy and pretty technical. I know that the conversation briefly, this person has done this for other communities. So they're pretty well versed in that, but that's something that we would have to take into consideration, that it's not something that can happen overnight. Even if we were awarded a bucket for this project, that it would have to really go through some lengthy procurement process. And to your answer, Karen, yes, you can have this out to another entity, but the town at the end of the day still has to oversee that entity. We are the people that are getting the money, not this person. There are stipulations in the CDBGR where a contractor can go on behalf of a community and ask for funds. These individuals, none of these individuals were vetted when we originally went through the CDBGR. So that is off the table for right now. So anything that would happen would have to go through the town, and the town would have to award a contractor or a management company and then oversee that management company. That is just the absolute guidelines that everyone has to follow.
So you'd have to look at their books. You'd have to look at
At the end of the day, we're responsible for how that's run.
So you gotta make
Not
sure
so
it's
much the day-to-day, the over-the-shoulder stuff, but making sure, again, any funds used under CDBGR, they have the right to come back 25 years and ask for proof
audit.
of how it was done each and every year to make sure that you're on the up and up. And not saying that this would happen or anything like that, but that's just the way the HUD works. So they're more than willing to provide workforce housing, and especially to the mayor's point, a subjugated group where you can say, here is your income threshold, and you can be within this threshold down the road, taking into consideration raises, things like that, and still having that core of people in that structure, not just being a turnstile for people to come and go.
Is there a way to partner with the bigger resorts and have them commit to X number of units, or you can't do that if you go through HUD?
At this point, it's all off the table. This would have been a discussion to have maybe a year and a half ago when the CDBG just got, yeah.
As they develop, not
Right.
part of this.
And coming forward, yes,
No, as,
but,
as these units develop,
correct.
can
Correct.
we,
Yes, you can.
can we encourage them to put workforce housing in there?
Yes,
Not,
you can.
not with the CDBG DR
Yeah.
program.
Yeah,
So this would be a government run or oversought.
Unfortunately, at this stage of the game, it would be.
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means we'd have to have staff dedicated to the oversight of this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Some,
At some point, some way, yes.
well, and that's what I wanted to get answers on. That's,
Right.
But I mean, that's just, we would have to do that regardless of just the way the document sits on the table today with the county. So,
yeah, my focus of wanting to get a consensus to bring this forward for a presentation or not was either we're going to have workforce housing or potentially, or we're not. And this was something that the town already owns. There's funding out there to help be able to do it. The management, all of that other stuff are all questions I think that need to be asked and then determined, is this something we want to be involved in or not? But it just, to me, seemed like something was worthwhile having a discussion on, and let the expert tell us,
definitely.
answer every question that we have. And from that point, decide, yeah, no, you know what I mean?
But if we have to have let's just say we did go forward with this and we have to have everything in by June 29th or before. I don't think we have time to wait until the next M&P.
Well, that's why I was asking if we had a,
We can do
A
we can
presentation.
draft a scope of work and get that into the pipeline. That's the most important thing, is to give them the scope of work and at least a rough outline of what we're asking for that initial bucket and put that in place. And I think we still have time to
Well,
discuss
yeah, I
this.
think for me, I don't want the
Yeah.
staff to waste any time or energy or money on this until
Right.
he has the time to spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes up here to say, here's what it is, here's how the program works, answer the questions. And then if he's like, you need to get going, or you're not going to get this funding, or we don't need the funding, or if we don't make the window, it really doesn't matter. I mean, obviously money is helpful, but so I just think having him be able to explain it and understand, the thresholds. What I found interesting about the financial thresholds is it seemed to me like it really promoted the teachers, the firefighters, the policemen, those type of, because it wasn't, you can only make $20,000 to qualify. It was a decent amount of money that I think some, teachers will fall into. I think, obviously servers, things like that, our employees, the town employees would qualify for stuff like that based on the income thresholds in there. So I just thought that's what really got me interested in is the thresholds that apply to something like this.
And the
Town
DR
employees is a
I think
big,
it'd be
The DR
interesting.
package expanded that threshold. So if it would have just been a regular CDBG program, we wouldn't have this discussion at all. But the DR actually expanded those thresholds and allowed for a higher ceiling to get more middle income people back to middle income work in a devastated area.
Because those apartment complex, they're, a typical apartment complex has a life of 30 to 40 years, but if you bring in that HUD component, it's obvious that shelf life is going to be lower. So what, long-term planning, it'd be great, but what in 20 years, if the place is, it's not, not
Yeah, well,
maintained and everything else.
and
But who does the maintenance too? I mean, who does?
that's all them. They
Okay.
do all of that. So
there's a lot of questions.
so for me, it was important to see if there was a possibility to have the commercial in front of it, because then there's an avenue for the town to actually collect
Oh,
money.
that's great.
And then, in talking with some of the people in the county and some other, there's an opportunity to have a hardened structure at the top level of that could be used or rented for, I can never remember the name of them, where you can go and you can rent the space to have, your computers, and you can have your own little office space type of thing.
Oh,
That
Oh, yeah.
could be used for that, for, the places that are, but also during time of a storm, it has a place the staff can go to that has backup generators on the roof, that has a hardened area that the town can get back to right away and be able to work in the area where they're used to working. And so, and he said, absolutely, that can be done. So those are the kind of the benefits that I thought would go along with, and that's why I wanted to see if you guys wanted to come in and talk, because he answered yes to a lot of those questions. And so it's not just a housing unit, it's something the town uses, it's something the community gets to use, and it's something that we could potentially generate some income off of. So
Well, Mayor, you've already got your consensus, and I'm always willing to listen to anything, but with the federal strings involved, I have some concerns, and I hope he can address those.
certainly, I think as soon as you mention the word federal, everybody has concerns. But so if it's possible to get him, I'll
June
reach out to
3rd.
him to see if he could come in
June 3rd.
at the June 3rd meeting and do a brief presentation and answer some questions.
Thank you.
Is that okay? All right. And then the other thing I have kind of ties in, John, to what you were talking about earlier. I reached out to TPI for their coastal protection system. And this was probably a few months ago that I reached out to ask for it. And there were some things in here that really caught my attention. We started talking about boardwalks. We started talking about things like that and how you can do it. And this was actually gone through permitting. There's all kinds of documentation that's already laid out there that the DEP looked at, that everybody's already looked at and approved. And some of the things that really connect with me, if you look at the very first page, reduced insurance costs. It allows for building at grade level without the 50% rule by having this coastal protection system. It protects from erosion, destructive scouring during storms, provides accessible pedestrian circulation and community beautification along beachfront, i.e. a boardwalk, creates 11 beach access points. This was just for the small section. So I guess I wanted to see if it was possible to bring it up on a future M&P to have a discussion, because one, does it help us get some DR funding for infrastructure? Two, is it something that the island, to help protect us, the dunes, or not the dunes, but the berms will do so much, but we learned in Idalia is those
They're gone.
berms wash away, right? This would be something that wouldn't wash away, that would protect the storms. Is something that we can get mitigation funds for? Is this something that we can now get and maybe potentially expand it beyond the small little swath, because if this was in place before the storm, we may still have a Times Square. They may have been flooded, but they would have been at least allowed to build back, which is what really caught my attention. So is this something we want to look at? Does this then allow us, it's something that's below ground. It's not something that's obtrusive that you see, but it allows you that ability to be able to your point, John, earlier when they were asking all the questions, you know, the bike pass and all of that kind of thing. Is this something that we could use and is now the opportunity to really take a hard look at it? And 99% of the work has already been done.
What about seawalls? Don't we have things in our ordinances about seawalls and?
But this is, I don't know. I mean, that we have to look at, is this considered a
Just was
seawall?
going to ask Chad to
I think this
weigh
is,
in.
yeah, I think this is very interesting, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's worth discussing further.
Did you say this was TPI?
This was Grand Resorts. This is, in my
Before it
opinion.
became more.
Yeah, so this was
retail.
one of the things that they were going to do as a benefit to the town for free. And we
Yeah,
did, and
yeah.
it wasn't accepted. So, but they were nice enough to at least share this detailed information with us to be able to start potentially the conversation
I
to,
know,
to make this happen.
Seawalls have come up at the MRF committee again. And I'm just going to ask Chad to weigh in on what those ordinances are. And
It's something that you as the town council can variance.
okay,
So it's not encouraged, but if there's a resilience benefit for that, I think it's a good justification. I think the challenge will be easements.
Sure.
You know, especially when you're talking about going all the way to Red Coconut. I know there's some challenges in there with easements. But
Yeah,
that's just a hurdle.
And I have no doubts that there's hurdles in it, and that's why I'd like to have the discussion, maybe get some, but you know, you see expanded dune systems. I mean, so it's something that could potentially, I think walking down the beach or going on the beach now, it's even going by boat this weekend, you could see that berm goes pretty much the entire, it's a long, so people understand the need to have this, especially because Adalia, to me now it seems just
Right.
smart to have this discussion, especially if there's a lot of funding out there to be able to get this done.
And the attenuation walls, even at some of the other accesses where it seems like the accesses are just kind of avenues or channels, we could have attenuation walls, not necessarily with the boardwalk, but just the attenuation walls to dissipate wave energy.
Sure. Do you, I guess, you're our environmental engineer. Do you think this is something
Not
that,
an engineer, no, sir.
sorry, expert, let's do that. Expert. How about that? I don't know if have you seen this or had any chance to review it or not when it was,
I did. I looked at that and saw it and thought it was very interesting and a lot of potential.
okay. So I won't belabor it too much, but I wanted to, and I can bring in all the other documentation if you want. It's mostly boring permits that had gone through or been supplied for and literally all the documentation's right there to make this happen. And try to get some of that infrastructure money, some of that mitigation funding.
The money is available. There's a lot of money on the table that goes unused for projects like this because you don't have a good plan in place. This is a plan that's already been developed, something that we could easily get going. And it shouldn't be a challenge to get people to come to the table and talk, whether it's a property owner or a commercial property owner. This benefits them
you're right.
just as much as it benefits the rest of the town.
Yeah, I
So-
think
so-
now's the time to expand. And and my understanding is they had approval from Edison House down to Shuckers before, when this was originally going through to do it. So is there an opportunity to expand it the entire length of the island? If it's something that could work you could have a boardwalk, but you also get that increased vegetation dune for protection. And it's not, some big glass wall or some big concrete wall going down. I think
love it.
it's something that we should look at, especially with the funding and the grants available.
Yep. Thanks for bringing it forward.
Okay, so we want to add it to the next M&P meeting? Is that
Please.
okay? And that's all I have. I appreciate you being patient with my long-winded agenda management, but with that, if there's nothing else, John?
I'm good. Thank you. Oh,
Peanut?
Peanut was asleep. Move to adjourn.